Hello, I'm Peter Bell, and I'm here with Mr. Chad Peters. Hello, Chad.
Hi, Peter. How you doing?
Very well, thanks. You're the president and CEO of Ridgeline Minerals. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Congratulations on your first week of trading here.
Thanks. It's been pretty good. We're happy with how it performed. So,
We've got a news release up from August 20th that shows you coming screaming out of the gate.
well, screaming, yeah, kicking and screaming out the gate. We got. I think we put out a press release. Just before when we closed our IPO last week, announcing our drill program at Salina, and then we just put this out on the 20th. Yeah, talking about our getting our permit for our Swift project, which is a really exciting kind of Battle Mountain Cortez trend type of exploration project that has a lot of potential. So we're pretty excited.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Good job. You've been doing some marketing and stuff to launch and the market. You're supporting a $30 million valuation here.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's been, I guess I probably shouldn't say this, but I was happily surprised with how the stock did this week. We're still a small company, don't really have the story out there yet. So the fact that we had some solid trading and kind of supported the stock was pretty awesome to see.
And where was the IPO?
45 cents. Yeah. So we actually opened, I believe our first open was at 54. Yep. I think on Monday morning, and then and we haven't gone below that since. So pretty happy.
And prior rounds when you were a private company, what kind of
financings? We did a 12-cent seed round in May of 2019. That was heavily supported by Haywood Securities and a lot of the early guys that supported the company, right? So Dave Elliott and Andy Williams out of Haywood. Our own team bought probably more shares than we maybe should have, but we all supported pretty heavily. And then on top of that, we had some incredible guys like Ewan Downey, Paul, Ron Little, a whole bunch of really great groups that came in, supported us early, and it was great. So we had a 12-cent round, 22-cent round in December and February of 2019 and 2020. So we actually broke it into two tranches just because we meant to raise in more like November of 2019, and it just got pushed back. And so we split it up just because obviously in December is a tough time of year to get something fully closed down. So we ended up splitting it across two, but it worked out well. We raised almost $3 million.
Well done. And yeah. August is a difficult time too. July was screaming, but August is always different. So good to see a healthy reception there.
Yeah, no doubt. No, it was kind of funny. Like, it seems like the way things have been so volatile lately that, 1 week it was like, oh man, I wish we'd been able to IPO this week. And then the next week it's like, oh, thank God we didn't IPO. Gold's down $180.
Lots of volatility. Yeah. Important to have a steady hand on the wheel at these times, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
And a young team here, but it sounds like a competent team. Lots of good eyes on and good people involved so far. Some good chatter on CEO.ca here as well that we're looking at. Let's have a look at this verify deck and see what we see.
Hopefully it works, right? Always hope it loads.
They do great work. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. No, they do. And we kind of jumped on that bandwagon early, even as a private company. I kind of had to fight a little bit with a few folks, initially to kind of, say, yeah, we need even as a private co, we need a verified deck. But I think it's been great for getting that story across and trying to be transparent with everything we're doing, right? So.
And I'm looking out at this picture. This is the view from one of your projects.
Yeah, this is the view. Actually, that's right off the edge of the drill pad on our at our Carlin East project. The hole we drilled last year that proved our geologic model and showed that the lower plate host rocks were actually only about 800 feet down instead of the 1,500 to 2,000. Sorry, meters. I meant 1,500 to 2,000 meters that Newmont had previously thought that the target area would be. So. You're looking. I mean, it's an incredible view. You're looking right at the Gold Strike pit, which is in and around 40 million ounce and still producing mine, right? So
how did you get this ground here?
That's a good question. So it was kind of a funny start to the company, right? I co-founded the company in 2019. And co-founded it with a drilling company, which, was great, good story. Everyone loved the idea, but we needed some ground to back it up, right? And that was a tough thing. We were still trying to figure out what was the right project, the right fit for the company. I had a couple failed land deals that didn't go through, learned a lot, learned a lot about negotiating land deals and stuff. And about, late 2019, we actually hooked up with the EMX guys and that's when things really started rolling. So they, I pitched them on our Selena project, and they loved the business model and all that. And they said, well, let's not just do one, let's just not do one project. Let's actually spin, 3 projects out into the company. And, I started looking, I didn't even know about these other 2 projects. They'd actually been holding these projects kind of a little bit behind the scenes and not marketing them heavily. Like Swift and Carlin East were not projects that they were pushing to the average, to the market in general.
Yeah.
And because they wanted to see it spun into a company that they could then take an equity position in. They call it their accelerator model. So, I started looking into it and I was like, oh my God, these projects are incredible. And, had huge potential. And so we ended up doing the deal. They took 10% of the company, and which our value at the time was pre-money was $750,000. So, essentially we optioned 20,000 acres of ground in Nevada for a very reasonable price. And what it allowed us to do was go in and put the money in the ground, because the deals are very back end loaded. So in the sense that they took 10% of the company right off the top. We don't have any work commitments or anything like that to actually, to satisfy it. Actually, once we completed our IPO and raised $2.5 million, those were the 2 contingencies that EMX set as part of the land deal. So if we could prove that we could raise enough money to advance the projects and then also take the company public, they felt confident that we could use the money as we saw fit to actually explore the projects. Yeah. And it worked out really well. So
did they include an anti-dilution right for themselves?
They did, yeah. So the first $2.5 million was a carried interest. So we had to raise 2.5. They got a carried interest in it. They're still right before the IPO. We satisfied all of that in our second tranche of the second round, and they participated on the second round. And cool. I'm sure that they'll be maintaining their 9.9. They'll be buying back in and getting it back up to 9.9. They sunk just a little below 9.9 on the IPO, but they've got a lot of deals in the mix right now. So.
Well, but they've got a lot of cash too, so.
Yeah, well, and it was crazy because it was amazing that we ended up on the IPO. I think we had 12 million in orders in the first 7 days, right? We were trying to raise $2 million. The base amount was 2 million, and we couldn't have gotten any luckier than the way when we kicked off the IPO. I mean, we were planning on doing the IPO in April. And, obviously that was not a good time. COVID hit, and we just were like, Haywood, literally, I think I got a voicemail from one of the guys at Haywood and just said IPO's off. And we didn't even, didn't get a chance to chat. I just checked my voicemail. I was like, yeah, hey man, the IPO is going to have to wait. And I was like, oh man. And it ended up working out really well. Like we ended up IPOing into a way stronger market, and had a lot of interest on the IPO, which is great. So we upsized to 5 million, which meant that we cut back more money than we actually ended up taking. So, and that was all because we felt that we were we felt at 45 cents we were undervalued. And 5 million was the maximum amount of dilution we were willing to accept at that valuation. So, what
was the valuation where you took in the 5?
The valuation at 5 would have been 21 million. 45 cents. Our pre-money valuation was about 15. So, and 16, and so yeah, I think it worked out well. I mean, I think our first week so far kind of helped support that idea that we felt we were a little bit undervalued, and hopefully we're able to maintain.
That's it. There has to be upside. It can't be all baked in already, right?
Yeah. Well, I made that mistake when I started the company, right? Like I told my wife, she said, how long will it take to get financed? And I was like, well, I don't know, probably 6 months. It can't be that hard, right? Kind of thing. And so I learned a lot after that, and realized like I had the company way overvalued back in the early days of the company. I was trying to value it at, when you build something yourself, you obviously put a lot of value on it, right? And unfortunately, not everyone else feels the same way. So had a lot of, you could say, failed pitches to different various groups who, they all said the same thing. We like you, we like the company, we think it's a great idea. You're overvalued. We're not in, kind of thing. And so it took about 8 months to kind of, take a step back, lop our valuation probably by, 70%, kind of thing, give or take, 60, 70%. And then that's right when I decided, hey, maybe my company's not worth as much as I think. We hooked up with the EMX guys. They were huge in being like, I kind of went to them at that point. I said, well, look, what do you think we're worth? I have no, really, how do you value something that has no value, right? It's just an idea and a shell. And so they were great. They kind of, they said, look, we think you're somewhere between 500 and $1 million. Went to Haywood. We got introduced to the Haywood guys after that through the EMX team. Nice. They said the same thing. We just settled right on the middle. I mean, it was kind of like, okay, let's do that. And actually, I think something that kind of maybe sets us apart from a lot of different companies is our seed round shares, we didn't issue seed round shares, you know, like we've incorporated in March of 2018, right? But we didn't actually issue any seed round shares when that happened. We just kept the minimum 100 shares I think we had for each, you know, myself and my founder. And we only issued shares once we actually had the seed round lined up. And so we went and we said, okay, well, our value is 750,000 pre-money. We're doing the seed round at 12 cents. So let's just cut 6.25 million shares for Chad and Steve and call it square. And that was our, you know, our founder shares. So, you know, I'd like to think that, you know, we didn't just go out and say, well, let's each take 5 million shares or 10 million shares or whatever. Right. And,
right.
You know, super dirt cheap shares and stocks. So like to think that we've tried to maintain right from the very start of the company that we're aligned with shareholders. And the only way we make money is if we get that stock price up.
Those foundational decisions are so important. And
well, I felt like it maybe wasn't a choice at the time because that was kind of a heavy suggestion from the, you know, like, hey, you should do this. And, you know, but I mean, they were right. They were like, you know, Dave Cole, Dave Elliott, all these guys. I mean, they said, look, you want to set yourself apart, start treating your company like you give a shit and you own it. You know, and which we did. I was treating it very much like that way, but they just said, look, a big problem with the industry is that people are not aligned with the shareholders. No one's going to invest in you if they don't think you're going to, you know, kill yourself to make it a success. And that's what, you know, so I think that was the right approach and it's worked out well. I might've been paraphrasing a bit there, but that was the general conversation.
Well, and it's funny to me that it's your first time out too, right? You had these failed attempts you mentioned, but really first time out in a lot of ways, right? And maybe you're learning quickly or what it was that
we'll learn the hard way on a few things for sure. Like you know, I don't know, like I had felt, you know, and I think probably half the folks in the gold space probably felt the same way, right? Like 2017, 2018, it felt like things were turning. I remember I went to 2018 the roundup and like everybody was excited and I was like, okay, perfect, you know, like maybe the markets are going to turn, right? And it ended up being, you know, 2018 was a brutal time to raise money. I didn't raise a dime. Luckily, I think, to be honest, I ended up not burning good shareholders, you know,
that's
like
key.
I worked my way through a lot of kind of, you call it what you want, like fringe investors, people that was probably a good thing the deals didn't work out, right? Because if it didn't work out, maybe my kneecaps were going to get broken. And, you know, kind of thing. But, you know, like, and so I think reshifting the focus and properly valuing the company and stuff was huge. And yeah, I mean, for a first time, I've been lucky enough to kind of just, you know, I worked for you and Downey and those guys for years, was able to build out a pretty good network of kind of folks that kind of, you call it what you want. They're definitely mentors, you know, over the last, you know, 10 years of my career and stuff. So kind of the whole way along, I was probably blowing up their phone more than they appreciated. You know, hey, what do you think of this? Nah, it's a stupid idea. Okay, well, what do you think of that? That is also a stupid idea. Don't do that. You know, kind of thing. And worked our way through it. And you know, I think it worked out really well. We got a good team now. We got great shareholders. You know, I was lucky enough. I convinced our VP exploration, Mike Harp. He was working for Gold Standard Ventures for years, right? Like I think he started with them when they were a 15-cent stock in like 2010 or 2011. Pretty much their first 6 months of ever even existing. He came right out of school, and you know, so he knew what it was like to work for a junior, right from a startup. I mean, Gold Standard found a bunch of gold there over the last, you know, especially over the last 5 years, right? Multiple discoveries. Mike was a heavy part of making those discoveries. So I kind of called him up in 2019 and said, I showed him the projects that EMX had. We hadn't closed the deal yet, but I said, if I were to get these, what do you think? and he just wrote back and goes, I'm in. Like you close the deal, you know, you close the deal. Yeah, close the deal, I'm in. And so but it was funny because I called him up and said, okay, I closed the deal. We raised $1.5 million, but I need you to take a $40,000 pay cut. And he was like, oh, okay. You know, kind of, and he's like, yeah, give me, but I said, the only thing I can tell you is that I'm going to take the exact same pay cut, you know, kind of thing. Like we'll make the same amount. We're not, you know, like right across the board. And if you wanted to invest in the seed round, that would be awesome too, kind of thing. And so he called back like an hour later and goes, yep, we're in. And, you know, we'll invest in the seed round as well. So, you know, he's been there right from the start and it's been awesome. So.
Well, when you have a project like this, right, you wait for your fat pitch and you see it coming and you just line it up.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, you know, all three of them are pretty exciting in their own way, but I mean, you can't stand up on the hill at Carlin East and not get a little excited, right? So
And just off the top, before diving into it, I wonder, like, exploration approach here. You said you drilled and demonstrated the proof of concept. I wonder, do you jump down the line and start drilling some more holes in that horizon and trying to start shipping ore off to somebody else for test work? Or,
I think, that's not really our, you could definitely go that route for sure. But I think that's, we're trying to stay away from, at this point, I think on getting too far advanced down the projects till we understand the scale. So
yeah,
I think the first step is go in, test that horizon. If we have, some success, obviously it's going to be something that groups like Nevada Gold Mines be pretty excited about. It's like literally 2.5 kilometers from a $4 billion mill. So, which they're, scrambling to keep full essentially. So
yeah.
I think, the goal for us would be if we can find something exciting there. And it really depends on what we were to hit, but, at that point, any drilling that we do wouldn't be necessarily focused on resource delineation. I'd like to take the route that like Great Bear took, for example, not to say that this is a direct analog to that, although I hope it would be, but I think they did an incredible job of, they made that discovery at the LP zone and Dixie, but they didn't just focus on saying, okay, we're just going to drill off this one little new discovery and say, maybe we can find a $2 million discovery, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
For $7 an ounce finding cost, maybe, if
exactly
we're lucky, right? Like,
yeah, they came in, they went and said, well, let's just see how big this thing could actually get. And I think they've done an incredible job of showing that this thing's, that their target is probably, another Hemlo or something, right? So, our goal would be the same thing. If we make a discovery, define what maybe the blue sky of it could be, and then we start digging into, working on it if we think it's worth it.
CJ Kim is out there, and he made a tweet on that line recently.
Yeah.
He was saying something like, the old school approach is get to a resource as quick as you can. New school approach is make it as big as you can and let the market speculate on the resource numbers. I like that. I'm with him on the new school approach there. And what you're saying, glad to hear you saying it as well. If I could add one thing to that whole discussion, it might be data. Data, right? So if you take all the data that you generate from your work programs and you make it available to this community online of people who, some of them are resource modeling experts, right? And they can do the geostatistical modeling very well on their own. Thank you very much, right? And you kind of crowdsource it in a way. If you do that, then you get a bunch of different people working on different models of different, based on the data, rather than the one consultant's coming up with their official report. And so, that's one thing that I would suggest to really make that new school approach a little bit more robust or a little bit more engaging for that crowd is if you really make all of your data available. I'm talking the full drill logs and assay sheets from all of the holes, all the entire lengths that you've assayed, just with the cloud, you can make so much data available now. And if
it's a pretty cool, that's a cool idea for sure. And like, I think that what we're doing with Verify is kind of that first step. We don't actually have a whole lot of, we don't have a lot of, hopefully
early days, very early days.
Hopefully we'll have some drill intercepts soon, but we do that, part of that whole data thing that again, going back to Great Bear as an example, that I think they've done a great job is they spent a couple of years putting the old historic data together, relogging holes and stuff. And that's what we're trying to do here is, we ended up at Swift, for example, we found, old core that was drilled from 1999 from Phelps Dodge. That's that drill intercept we have at Swift at 17 meters at 0.7 grams. We actually have that drill core. I have it sitting in my office right now. And to be able to look, go back, relog it. And sorry, my family keeps on texting me here. I'm trying to put it on no disturb. It's probably showing up on the screen.
Nope, I'm not seeing anything on this side.
Okay,
it's
good.
All good.
Well, there we go. Stop texting me, guys.
We could take a break here too in a minute.
No, it's nothing important. Trust me, just goofing around. No, they hit 17 meters in that, and Barrick didn't even know. Like, I talked to some Barrick folks, and data gets lost in Nevada, right? It's not like Canada where that stuff, it gets put on the public domain and it's accessible. You have companies that have, grown, come up, done all this work, and then just thrown it in the garbage. or it got lost in a warehouse somewhere, right?
Or sitting in somebody's garage. There's some prospector who's
yeah,
ended up with
yeah,
the patented claims somehow, and he's got the old reports and
yeah,
paper
exactly.
copy only, and nobody's looked at them in 20 years.
Yeah. And
Lots
we
of
found this
opportunity.
illegal royalty zone, this core. So
Yeah,
we
well
ended up,
done.
yeah, and it was a hole that was 3,000 feet deep. So that's a $250,000 hole to drill. And we bought that core for 10 grand, kind
Oh,
of thing. So it's like, just little things like that you can do to build out your
beautiful.
data ahead of the time is, I think it's huge. So we're working on a lot of that. The last 2 years have been putting the story together, raising the money so that we can, do all that baseline work. And then, so, the whole point of it is at the end of the day, we don't want to be throwing pot shot holes out there. Like the holes at Carlin East, they're expensive. They're not cheap. It's shareholder money. So the whole goal is, what are we doing? If you're not drilling a hole for a direct reason, if you don't like, in my opinion, if you're not drilling a hole to make a discovery every time,
Yeah.
then you shouldn't drill that hole, kind of thing. I've heard stories of people saying, we drilled a strat hole, and a kind of thing, a 3,000 foot strat hole. And it's like, okay, so that was $500,000. That's great. Or, not $500,000. That's an exaggeration, but $300,000 easy on a bad hole, a deep hole like that. And you just drill a strat hole, right? And it's like, okay,
No.
that's an approach that you can take, no doubt about it. You learn something from it. But if you went back to shareholders and said, hey, I drilled this hole just for the hell of it, just because I'd like to make sure, know exactly what type of rocks we're in, that's definitely an important part of it. But if I'm going to do a strat hole, I'm going to try to plug that strat hole into something that also could be carrying grade, right? So it's just it's our approach, I guess.
Been reading Sig Musig's exploration canons a lot lately, and there's lots of valuable lessons in there for people who are geologists. They always need to read that again, I think, and people who aren't geologists too, who wonder. I know there's lots of investors out there. Sometimes we get baffled and confused by what companies are doing, and sometimes that's for good reason. They don't. Some companies don't seem to know quite what they're doing or what they should be doing to really
it's
move
tough,
the thing
and
forward.
especially in the tough markets too, right? Because what you end up with is people cutting corners, which I think is why a lot of discoveries, why you're getting a lot of money getting wasted and discoveries dropping, right? Is because you have groups that are they're hogtied in a way, right? It's like, well, if you're only able to raise $1 million and that you need to do 2 million worth of work to actually properly advance that thing, but at the same time you also know that if you don't put out results, your stock's going to drop even farther. You end up you end up doing partial work, and it's in a lot of cases it's not always it's not their fault or a bad thing, right? It's just a sign of the times you're in. So I think lucky to be that we IPO'd into a better market that we can kind of have a little bit of flexibility, I think.
But to some degree it is their fault too, to some degree it's a function of behavior and having a playbook or not having a playbook. Do you really know what you're doing, or are you kind of making it up as you go? And there's room for that in exploration. It's an adventurous business. But for the investors, a lot of investors try and be really disciplined with this stuff too, and they appreciate it, I think, when management have that same attitude and approach.
I totally agree. Like that's comes back to the drilling contract, right? It's like there's a million geos out there that think they have a good idea. So how do you separate yourself from the pack and actually show that you're spending shareholder money properly and you actually give a shit about their money? I think that drilling contract was a good start, for us. And then the rest of it was just a lot of the things we're doing, which is I got kind of given a hard time one time from one guy that said, well, this looks like an obvious drill target. Why are you drilling the soils? Why are you doing the geophysics? I mean, there's already a drill hole here. There's just drill it, right? And it was like, why are you wasting $100,000 doing that? And my kind of point back was like, well, it's, you're right. You could go put a drill hole there and you might just get lucky, because that's what it would be, right? It would be like an inferred guess would be about where you're putting that hole. But in my eyes, we spent that $100,000, we did the work, and now we're absolutely sure where we want to be putting that hole. And if you'd asked me 6 months ago where that hole was going to go, it's not where it's going today.
Yeah.
Or, in September, right? So when you're talking about $150,000 holes, well, just one poorly planned hole pays for the entire baseline work, right? So, I think it's a business model that's worked for us, and luckily we have some, we've kind of sold the story to the shareholders that have come in on the IPO and previously on the private rounds as, look, we're doing these things systematically. It's all part of the exploration process, and you're not going to see. We're not going to drill these things for quick, flashy results. We're looking for economic gold deposits. So to get to that point, it requires a certain amount of work to get there. And luckily, we have a really, the board's been supportive. Mike's, was 100%. He was a big driving force as well behind that general concept. So it's worked out well for us, and we're just going to try to keep executing.
Mr. Mike Blady, a big shout out to him. Well done.
Yeah, Mike has been awesome. He's been a big part of the company.
You got to be focused when you have 100 plus square kilometers of ground in Nevada, right?
Yeah, that's it, right? Yeah, you could, we could drill, you could drill 80 poorly planned holes and still not kill off a target, right, or kill off an entire project when you're talking 116 square kilometers. So it's ranking our, we actually, Lou Teal, one of our board members, he was with Newmont for 25 years. So he got really into the like ranking and systematic ranking of projects and targets, right? So we go through that regularly with him. He kind of is that, him and a few other guys that we use kind of as call it peer review or whatever, guys that have been doing it for years. But they kind of come in and just pick holes in what we're doing. And then they'll say, we really just go through and we rank each target, and then we rank all the targets within a project, and we rank those projects from top to bottom as well, right? So if you'd have talked to me in February, it went Carlin, East, Swift, Salina. Then we went and we started working on our Salina project in the spring. We trenched 50 meters of 0.6 across an untested drill target, which we're now drilling right now. Yep. Suddenly Salina goes a little bit up in the ranking, right? Yep. To be honest, I think in big picture, Carlin, East, and Swift are still our top two projects, but Salina just keeps on getting more and more exciting. I mean, we're getting great rock chips at surface, widespread alteration and mineralization, for a project that's been forgotten about for 25 years, it's pretty exciting to come in and be able to kind of get it back up and going again.
Well, and would you let somebody else start earning into one of these, like Carlin East? Would you let somebody else pay for those big, deep, expensive holes?
Well, that's a good question. I think depending on what we're able to show with our drilling in the next 6 months, it's highly, like if we hit into something really, truly amazing, you can go out and raise the money to do it. But I think, like a project like Carlin East, that's the kind of project that will take $20 million, $25 million. If you make a discovery to turn it into the next gold rush or the next 4 mile big discovery, if you were to get it to that point, it's going to be huge. So I'd rather bring on a partner at a, the right time, at the right valuation, make sure that we get that value for the company. But if I can hold a 40% retained interest on something and let someone else take the risk and the dilution, because I mean, frankly, right now, we'd have to raise our current market cap just to advance the project, right?
Yep.
So,
but then you're in the driver's seat too, right? So then there's that thing about, well, we like our process, we think we're going to do it better than they are, blah blah blah. So it's not so easy.
Yeah, I know for sure, and I think that every project is different, and every So I mean, it really comes down to what you hit, right? If you hit something truly amazing, I think you can really put the screws to whoever's coming in the sense of you can say, no, I want to see $20 million going in the ground in the first 2 years, or we get the whole project back.
Yeah,
right?
and we want Louis Teal to be,
and we're gonna have
he's gonna have veto power over every hole. Like, sorry, non-negotiable.
Exactly. So Lou is actually one of the senior geos in charge of the discovery of the Leeville deposit, right, which is just 3 kilometers away. So him, Mac Jackson, that whole team there. Mac is actually doing mapping for us now. He's the vice president of exploration for Gold Standard Ventures. He's been mapping our Swift project for us. So we're bringing in, with 100 kilometers and 3 full-time geologists working for the company, we've had to bring in guys like Mac and Lou and all that to help us kind of advance the projects. But we got a good team for sure.
Noteworthy that he's still working for the Newmont Carlin Trend Exploration Group there, correct?
No, Lou's retired now. So Lou was with him for 30 odd years. He actually was the group executive for South America on the exploration side for Newmont for I think almost 7 or 8 years. But he's got tons of global experience, found a bunch of gold in Nevada back in the 90s and 2000s, and then he moved down to South America. But so he's still, you talk to him about Leeville, for example, and he still remembers the grade and thickness of the original holes. He's pretty tuned into that stuff.
I'm starting to wonder about when we'll see some of those bigger companies doing more with the juniors on, strategic relationships, right? Because the example of the land package that you guys have at Carlin East there, right?
Well, I think it's starting to come around. Like luckily, I was part of the team with Premier Gold that had Barrick to take over and joint venture into the McCoy Cove project. So I actually led the transition for Premier's side for Barrick coming in. So I got to know that whole team really well, and they're actually cool. They're awesome. They actually part of the reason I started RidgeLine is I spent 6 months working with them and they came right into Cove, and they're like, well, you didn't do your full soils, you didn't do all, you know, and they said, we're doing property wide of everything.
Yeah, wonderful. I love it.
And
Yes.
but we did it, and we ended up identifying like 6 more targets.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
So I that was pretty eye opening. I was like, holy man! Like, and this was one of the biggest gold mining companies in the world, still doing like very much
the
grassroots
early stage scientific stuff. Yeah.
So I was pretty impressed by that, and so we kind of was part of how we kind of pulled it all together. But yeah, I think with our land package and stuff, I think all we have to do is show some positive. We're collecting the data the way Barrick would like to see it done, and other groups, Kinross, you know, all the good. There's some really good production companies in the state, SSR. So we're collecting that data really well, which I think gives them a level of confidence in the work that we're doing. So if we have any good results, obviously I think that there'd be a good chance for them to come in and want to do something with us on it.
That stuff SSR is doing in Nevada is very impressive. Big fan of them.
Yeah, no, I got a couple buddies that actually work for them and stuff, and it's been pretty impressive what they've been able to do since taking over that project at Marigold.
Paul Stevens, investment management institutional holder there, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, Paul's been great. He came in the private rounds. He's been huge. Made a lot of introductions to other folks as well. So we're very lucky to have him as a shareholder. It's been great. And then we got EMX, Vior, Ethos on the public side. So yeah, it's been we got a good mix of shareholders.
Well, and it's good to hear Nevada too, right? Thinking about the quotes of Bristow here, talking about the next big gold mines will be copper mines. Good to see you guys fire back a little bit with like, no, there's still gold to be found out there in Nevada, no less.
Yeah, well, you know, and there's still discoveries being made even right now in Nevada, right? Like even Barrick just put out in their Q2 results, they just announced 20 meters of 35 grams per ton in their North Leeville target, which is, I don't know exactly where that is, but it's, you know, it's north of the known resource along that Leeville corridor that extends up towards our property. And they're talking now about how it's going to be they're going to work on adding it into their resource base. Cause I mean, that's a 700 GT hole. That's world class. Like, you know, and that's within a brownfields district, right? So that's why I think, like, you know, Barrick's made the majority of discoveries in Nevada of big ones, right? Like there's a lot of great work being done across the board, but, you know, we're talking 10 million ounce plus deposits. Those are still being made primarily by the Barrick team, right? So
depth, what kind of depth do you have a sense for that hit?
Yeah, well, you know, I know that lower plate is 800 meters at our project. It's roughly in the 500 to 600 meter at the Leeville deposit. So, you know, you can bracket in that range. I would guess that's somewhere in that range. But
and do you think they drilled that from surface, or do you think they drilled that underground?
It's tough to say. Of course, they were pretty, you know, they put the dot on the map, and it's like a 30 square kilometer map, right? So, you know, it's like, okay, I know it's in that general area. It looks like a surface hole kind of thing. That'd be my guess, but you know, tough to say for sure.
Look at this district, right? Just mind-boggling. And here you are in Winnemucca, off to the west there.
Yeah, no, we live right on the edge of it. So it's funny, we moved here in 2012, and I thought it'd be 6 months. We didn't even sell our house in Canada. Like we kept it, and like we were like, all right, we'll be back here in a year. And you know, going on 9 years now, and 2 kids and a dog and a cat, we're still in Winnemucca. So, but we love it here. And it's nice to be close to the projects, right? Like, you know, in Canada, you get people working for, you know, month-long shifts. They fly in and out. I mean, you got kids too. It's tough to do, you know, to have a family and a home life in any sense, right? And still get to be a part of it. So, you know, living here, I can still drive to the projects, you know, do the odd bit of camping out down at Salina, because it is a bit out of the way. But the other two are within 45 minutes of I-80. Right? Yeah. So pretty good spot to be.
Really important to have the leadership close to the drill bit.
I think in the early stages, especially, right? Like, you know, as a company grows, you know, you can, you know, things can change. Maybe you change your headquarters or whatever as you know, as the company grows and stuff. But when where we're at right now, just trying to go out and make discoveries, I'd rather be able to be out mapping and doing all that with my team, you know, on any given day than worrying about hopping on a plane. So.
Well, and you have phone. You know, there's connectivity for the most part, I'm sure, where you're at. So
it's not too bad. Yeah, no, I got 2 out of the 3. We have LTE on top of the hills. So
that's wonderful.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Salina.
Yeah. Salina. So Salina is definitely, like I was saying, it's ratcheting up the priority level.
Isn't that funny?
The more and more we get to know it. Because I mean, that's the thing, oxide, right? Like when you got oxide, gold, silver at surface, if you go to the next slide, You can see, there we go. Nice. Right. I forgot we were in verify. So you can see where we are. We're right. If you go to click to the next guy, we're 100% owned 26 square kilometer package. And if you look to the northwest, you'll see the Golden Butte line. You can just click to the next slide. Actually, if you just, you got Golden Butte there. And then if you click on the arrows down at the bottom, it'll swing your view over towards the Bald Mountain mine. And you got, Bald Mountain's only 12 kilometers away.
Yep.
It's right up the trend, and they're producing 150,000 ounces a year out of that.
And then a couple slides ago, we saw Bald Mountain down in the lower southeast corner of the view. So
yes, yeah.
Selena's not shown on the map with the other two, but it's not far away. No,
it's not. I mean, it takes a bit of a drive just because there's so many mountain ranges in between. But
yes,
it's 60, 70, 100. I guess maybe 100 kilometers down the trend from like the main kind of I-80 corridor, I guess you could call it. So. And
is this a highway coming through here too?
Those are some pretty good quality dirt roads, so it's good access right to the project. I mean, we can take a low boy with an excavator and a semi truck right up to the edge of the property, pretty much.
Nice looking land package, yeah. And so layers of data on this one already.
Yeah, we came in. There wasn't a lot,
Yeah, that's typical Nevada, right? There's no government surveys or anything like this.
No, there's nothing, right? So we came in and EMX had done a good job of identifying a couple, they trenched 20 meters of 0.6 across the chinchilla target, which would become our chinchilla zone. And that's what kind of drew me to it. They had up to 6 grams in rock chips, decent grades in trenching.
Good.
And we came in and Mike Harp, I actually was looking at getting rid of the project when we first got it, right? Because it was a package deal that came out of EMX, and it was our land package was 260 grand in land payments, right? I'd only raised $1.5 million Canadian, which at the current time, that was like little over $1 million US. So 25% of our budget was going just towards holding the ground.
Yeah, that's not good.
It was tough, right? And so we were like, all right, if I can pair Selena out of the, find a good partner for it, right? I was like, maybe that's a good idea. And so, but the first time I brought Mike Harp down to take a look, and he'd been working on the Gold Standard discovery, the railroad district, so Dark Star, Pinion, all that. And we went down and we actually had one of the groups that I was looking at potentially optioning the ground to with us. And Mike disappears into the bushes, and I hear Hammer going off, and he goes, "Chet, get over here." And I'm like, what? I was kind of like to the other guys, I'm like, hey, just give me a minute. I'm just going to go see if Mike's okay. So I get over there, and he's like holding a chunk of rock, and it's like pure red jasperite, right? Yeah. And he goes, "We're not selling this project." I was like, dude, we already got terms. Like, we already have terms set up on the project. Like, they're ready to go.
No, can't do it.
And he was like, "You sell this project, I might as well quit, because if we're going to give away projects that have gold on them, I'm out." And I was like, okay. And I was like, you realize that's like an extra 80 grand a year we're going to have to stop, hold just to hold this thing. And he's like, no, it looks like it has legs to it. And so it's kind of funny. We came out, did the tour, took the guys out for beers afterwards, and they're like, all right, we're ready to sign. It's like, yeah, just give us a little bit to think about it, and luckily, we have a really good relationship with that team. They've been great. They ended up becoming investors in the company. So it's like, all right, the land deal didn't work, but they ended up investing in the company, and it worked out well. But yeah, so we've done gravity, we've done soils. We've mapped the majority of the project now at this point, 26 square kilometers. So we spent most of the spring camping out in a 20-foot trailer that I bought, just so the guys could social distance and not have to stay in a hotel or eat out at restaurants, right?
Perfect.
So we saved a ton of time. No one got sick, and we were able to advance the project. So
good for you.
So the first thing was those trenches. We trenched 50 meters of 0.6, and then we went down the hillside another 100 meters, and we trenched 38 meters of 0.75, and pretty high silver too. So started getting exciting pretty quick.
And you getting sulfides in some of those even?
Not a bit, no. Nothing so far. Nothing we can identify in hand specimen. Although you certainly start crushing rock up and stuff, you never know, you might find something. But we did cyanide solubility testing on anything greater than 0.2 grams per ton across all of our trenches. And we saw an average cyanide solubility of 79% gold and 65% silver. So that's far from a metallurgical study. There's a whole bunch, bottle rolls, column tests would be the next step once you actually hopefully find something. But, for that stage of what we're doing, it shows that this thing is certainly amenable to a heap leach processing. And, ideally we find something, and I'll let them worry about, shaving percentage points off of your recoveries, right? That's not really what we want to be as a company. We want to make discoveries, show that there's potential to grow these things into large deposits, and then we'll sell it off to someone at hopefully a great valuation that can take it to the finish line.
Simple, right?
Yeah, in a good market, it's simple. In a tough market, it's not simple in any market, but it's certainly a little bit of an easier story when gold's at $2,000 or close to.
Lots of good exposure here too. So the mapping was pretty straightforward.
Oh yeah. It's just pinyon pine and juniper trees and stuff, and typical Nevada topography, especially for this area. So it's actually our easiest to get around project for sure. You get up at Carlin East, you get up to 8,000 feet on the tops of the hills, and it can get pretty rough. So
and some of the ridge lines and stuff around here too, it looks like the topography pretty interesting.
It can get pretty steep up there to the north.
Some of those valleys for sure.
Mm-hmm. But so we're really we're excited about Selena. I think we just wrapped up our program today actually, and we'll be another 3 to 4 weeks to get the final assays done, but we're liking what we're seeing. So
producing mine 12 clicks away. Wonderful. Yeah. Where does do we have a view on where the trenches were?
Yeah. This should be in the first few slides here. It takes a few seconds to download, which is always, that's the only thing I think if they could get like a compression, that's the last thing they need is so they can compress large amounts of data, I think would be pretty amazing for Verify. But so if you go to a couple more slides ahead, just click on those arrows there. Yeah.
1980s drilling here.
Yeah, that's all from that's the old Keratomex drilling programs that were done a long time ago. So
pretty limited coverage,
and all drilling almost entirely across the pediment too. So
what's that about, right?
Well, that was I think there's certainly potential. Like the idea is all of that gray rock there is the Gilmet limestone. Regionally, the Pilot Shale, which is the darker blue, that's kind of sandwiched in there right against that. That is the better host rock, Alligator Ridge, all these areas, even the gold standard deposits and up to the north, those are all hosted within the web, which is the analog to the Pilot. So that's what everyone was looking for. And I think what they did is they projected the Pilot underneath that yellow cover and said, we're seeing something on the hillside. Let's chase it down the valley, which isn't a bad idea. We're actually doing the similar thing. We're just doing it on different targets down to the south at Chinchilla and Juniper. So it's, but I think they kind of, luckily for us, I think they missed some exciting stuff that we're finding now.
Well, maybe some obvious stuff too. It's great. I'm just looking at this part, the Juniper fault around there, and a couple holes over there, and then all these holes on the area with the cover, but not a lot in between. You always wonder what people were thinking.
Well, it's funny. Like, I think if you look back at some of the old timer work and stuff, and a lot of times there was really good geology being applied to it, but there was totally different economics, right? And I think that I remember even at Cove, you could see the age of the drilling by how deep it was. So you could see that, okay, well, in 1996, they only drilled to 500 feet, and there's 80 holes that stop at 500. Even if those holes were in mineralization, they were stopping at 500.
They were stopping,
Yeah, so it was a different, I think it was a different time for exploration and stuff, and there was a lot more hard lines put on things and stuff. You can be a little more, people are maybe, thinking a little bit more outside the box nowadays. So it's good.
Well, chips, rocks to get the geochem, right? This is really the layers of data that matter.
Yeah, and that's our full 3D model. I mean, you can tilt that up if you tilt. Like we've built a full 3D model on this thing. Break across the entire project. Of course, it's going to change probably 100 times before we probably get even close to getting it fully right. But that's exploration. So, so we've got the Chinchilla and the Juniper zones. Chinchilla, we trenched those great rock chips. Juniper, parallel zone that we're seeing up to 16.5 grams gold in jasperoid, up to 1,500 grams per ton silver. I mean, those are incredible grades at surface, right? Like in my 9 years in Nevada, I've never come across that, consistent high grade gold at surface like that. So, the main thing for us was, I think if you go to the next slide, actually, it'll show you those trenches you were asking about. We'll see here if it does. Yeah. Hey, I remembered. Yeah. So that's what trench 5 looked like coming across. Pretty, if you were walking on this stuff, I remember the first few times I was out, the outcrops themselves, when they were weathered, they just weathered dark gray, pretty silicified, didn't look all that, terribly exciting, to be honest. And only when we ripped it open with a bulldozer, did we actually see the potential continuity? I mean, we thought maybe there was, even GMX had sampled 20 meters, right? They'd gotten a zone that was about 20 meters wide.
Yeah.
We went right across on, perpendicular across what the projected zone was, and we were able to significantly grow that. So,
and you think this is across, right? Looking at the geology and things like this, this is not along that 50-meter trench is not along the zone.
Yeah. I mean, I think our eventual, we figured that the true width was about 90%, 95% of what we trenched. So, and you can see there was old disturbance there. You can see some of that old disturbance on the other side of the trench. Back in the 1990s and 80s, they trenched for some reason like 300 feet off of the fault zone. And if you go out in that fault zone area, we actually found that our soils anomaly was huge right where they were trenching. Well, the problem is the reason that soils anomaly was huge was because that's on the side of the hill, and all of the material that had been eroding off of the hillside sloughed down there.
Yeah.
And so they pretty much just they said, wow, that's a huge anomaly. We're going to trench across it. And they came up empty handed. If they'd have been 300 to 500 feet up the hill, they would have actually seen that, they would have gotten into the real zone that had been eroding off that hillside. So just kind of, funny stuff like that can kind of happen at times. And
there's a lot of exposure for you too now to work on and keep doing this.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, we're pretty, we've been,
well done.
Selena's kept on surprising us, I guess. It was kind of the redheaded stepchild a little bit for a while. It wasn't getting a lot of love from our team in the early days. I wasn't marketing it heavily as something we were terribly excited about, in the early days of the company. Because, to be honest, when you're trying to raise money with speculators in Vancouver that actually know the business, most of them don't get too excited if you say, well, hey, I think this might have a 500,000 ounce discovery potential. It doesn't really move the needle for them. They saw Swift and Carlin East say, wow, that could be 10 million ounces if you're right. But what we're finding now is that Selena has significantly greater potential than that initial kind of 500,000 ounces that I put on it as that rough. Well, maybe that could be our target, right? We think that there's more scale than that to the system now. So,
well, oxide at surface, right?
Yeah. It's something that every half gram per ton at surface of oxide is worth significantly more than 10 grams per ton 1,000 feet down. That's
totally. Yeah. Especially if it's refractory, right?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Exactly. Right. When you can process, when it takes maybe, anywhere from $40 to $50 a ton to process refractory rock at the Gold Strike mill, for example, with Barrick as a toll milling contract, you're looking at, you can throw a heap leach pad together and process that for like $5-6 a ton. Right.
Well, and Bald Mountain nearby, is that a heap leach or what are they doing there?
That's primarily heap leach. I believe they also have a small mill there to process, because I think they have a mix of both oxide and some refractory ore. It's actually a different, like Bald Mountain's a bit of a different deposit type. It's more of an intrusion related system. It's not a true Carlin, but the funny thing is right beside it is the Alligator Ridge mine, which is a true Carlin, more of a true Carlin system. So you tend to get Carlin systems associated with large intrusive systems in Nevada. So, kind of the proximity of Bald Mountain to Alligator Ridge and Yankee and all these other Carlin type zones kind of just shows that the systems are all interacting.
And are you thinking of going up, right? Stars Fault, some of these other areas up on the higher elevation in the project here? Is there any indications?
To be honest, it's getting better down the hill. So as you head out into the pediment, you're actually getting into the yellow cover that we saw in that geologic map before. And that is actually covering fully preserved pilot shale, which is the better, which would typically be the better host rock. So the system tends to be increasing in strength down the hill. Soils support that. Our mapping supports that before we lose it in gravels and stuff like that. So, and we're talking, when I say cover, we built multiple pads on this pediment, and we're getting into bedrock within 3 to 5 meters. We'll be digging a 3 meter deep sump, and we'll hit bedrock at the bottom of it. So it's not heavily covered, but it is, kind of got a little skin of gravel on top of it, and it's
beautiful,
kind of preserving what we think is a covered system underneath.
Well, I love how much action you can get out of just an excavator here too. Isn't that just great? Like
pretty incredible. Yeah. No, it's I've done I worked in the Arctic, I worked in Red Lake, I worked in Northern Canada for years. First 7-8 years of my career were pretty much working in every bush camp known to man in Northern Ontario, and getting chased around by bears and moose and stuff. And so the idea, and so to be able to come down here and explore like 9 or 10 months of the year and have it pretty much, surface exposure. You're not walking through swamp to go and try to, look at an outcrop or something like that. Nevada's pretty special from that standpoint. So,
and just off the highway, doesn't look like there's too much good road in here, but there's some road a little bit, so.
Yeah, you definitely have access, 2-track
Absolutely.
access, or to, not bad gravel road. I mean, I can tow my 25-foot travel trailer into
Beautiful.
go. I've camped on the site most of the spring with the guys.
Yeah.
So, if it's good enough road to get a trailer hitch trailer in there, then I think you're doing all right.
Speaking of buying assets and things, sometimes companies go out and buy drills. Any sense of buying an excavator and parking it out here to just have it going?
You know what? The amount that I've seen those things break down, I'd rather because the beauty of it is if one breaks down, the guy, it's on them to fix it, right?
Whether it's the blade or the track or the engine, there's all kinds of things that can be a nightmare.
Exactly. Like we've tried to cut costs wherever we could. We got the drill contract. We've collected our own soils. We're still collecting Mike's cousin, Tony, he's awesome. He ended up coming down. He's staying with him and he's been collecting soils for us all summer. He's incredible. And I think I was able to average like 15 to 20 samples a day, and he averages like 35. So it's like, all right, you go ahead and do that. You're doing great. But yeah, so we're cutting costs there, but I would probably stay away from buying an excavator. I broke too many of them.
Yep. And the pathfinders lighten up here and there down slope, as you said. Yep. And again, in this basin, in this kind of, interesting in there, and pretty dead around.
Yeah, we don't have soils up in the very top north corner. So kind of where it cuts on the north, we've actually infilled since then in between all those gaps, but everything north of like the chinchilla zone, we still got to fill in. That's kind of the next step, phasing it in. Okay. But yeah, that's the broken egg target you're pointing at right there. And that's kind of a pretty exciting target that we haven't had a chance to kind of work into yet. So the goal is prove that chinchilla and juniper have some legs to them. And then we'd love to stretch out and start putting a couple test holes and doing some work up in the broken egg area too, because that's a 3 kilometer long soils anomaly. And when you look at the arsenic contours, I mean, the purple is 1,000 to 3,000 ppm arsenic. Just to put that in perspective, the average arsenic values in the trenches at Chinchilla for a 0.6 to 0.7 gram per ton zone were in the range of 100 to 1,200 ppm arsenic. So you're essentially seeing you're seeing bleed up from a system beneath, and it's showing that strength of system. And we're seeing it at structural intersections, which is exactly what you want to see, right? Beautiful. That's where you're getting that structurally controlled leakage coming up from a deeper system below it. So we're seeing all the right things. It's just a matter of kind of going and improving it now.
Wonderful. And some hot grabs in there as well. 16 grams gold, 5 grams gold, 6 grams too. Yeah. Was that you guys or was that historic?
No, that was us. Yeah, that was actually that was Mike and Gabe, our two geos, and they we got 1,500 grams silver. I mean, with the way silver's performed lately, that's like 10 grams per ton gold equivalent.
And so those were rock grabs or were those soils?
Those are so the triangles are rock grabs, and then the soils contours represent the soil samples on a 100 meter grid. So I mean. And we really tried hard, like I said, to Gabe, he's our new geo. He's fresh out of school. He's about a year out of school now, and he's been incredible. And he's like, so do I try to get the grade? What's the goal? Like, do we want it to be really high grade? And I said, well, of course we want it to be high grade, but no, it needs to be represented. Like, don't high grade it. Just go up, take as many samples as you can, and then it'll come out what the grade is, right? Like, it's as soon as you start trying to high grade it, which he wasn't trying to do. He's just, we're working with him. He's been a really great young geo. So
and it's a process. Just keep, expect, as you said, do as many as you can, and then go back the next day and do some more.
That's the point, right? Some more. It's all about the statistics of it. And I think we took 91 samples in the juniper area. The average gold grade was 0.47 gold and 47 grams silver. So out of 91 samples, all of those triangles through there, we still managed to be almost a 0.47 gram per ton average grade, which of course is pretty heavily skewed by a few 16 and a half grammars in there. That doesn't hurt. But so we're doing all that. That's been our big focus this spring. And I think what we're doing now is, now that we're done with the second phase of Selena drilling, we're really going to hit Swift and Carlin East hard. So that's kind of the next.
And for people who are looking at this, it's important to kind of think about, what's the size of a pit, right? And what's the size of the project area? And always trying to come back to scale bars and having some sense of, intervals of distance and how big, a small pit would be, how big would a big pit be, and, what would that look like versus the topography and stuff like that too, right? So
Oh, it's a really good point. I mean, I think, a lot of groups, you'll find, like, you'll see that as someone announces a new discovery and they've drilled 8 holes and they're all within 100 feet of each other. And they've pin cushioned a little area and they go, this is going to be a huge discovery. And it's like, if you can't step out, and show that this thing has scale to be 1 kilometer long and, a half kilometer wide and some real actual scale to it, then yeah, the chances of it actually ever being anything meaningful are very low, right? So the way we're designing this program right now at Selena is just doing that. It's a lot of wide space scout drilling, trying to hone in on where the heart of the system is. Because, I mean, we got 1.5 kilometers between Chinchilla and Juniper, and there could be a zone sandwiched anywhere between that, right? That could be actually the main part of the system. So
wonderful. Yeah, it's great to see this section underlaid on the surface there, and that Jasperoid breccia unit you were talking about. Yeah. And how it kind of outcrops over here, and then along that the Juniper fault, right? And that's right around the area where you were doing your trenching and stuff too. So,
and that's to scale, that's to scale cut from our Leapfrog model, right? That's our 3D model. You can actually turn it into almost like a hand-drawn section in Leapfrog, but like all of the things that we're doing they're to scale. They're not just, that's actually our 3D model that we're now planning drilling off of. So,
are these meter bars or feet?
Those are meter bars. Yeah, we've done everything in meters.
Cool.
Just to keep life simple. But you'll probably notice I switch between metric and imperial nonstop, and it drives people crazy.
Tough being in Nevada. Yeah, you can't make anybody happy. But yeah, what an interesting area. Thinking about just pitting into the side of a slope there, and the 500 meters interval here from 1,300 to 1,800 meters on this section. And just coming in right along the downslope there with that unit that's pretty at surface. Just great setup, and the grabs that you have at surface already to show grade, and the geochem as well relayed, and great start.
It's got us excited, right? It's like, in the sense of not trying to have too many forward-looking statements, but it's showing us all the right stuff. Like, you're seeing all the right setup for what could be something pretty exciting if we can prove the concept.
And always good to see the rock unit that you're interested in dipping with the slope, right? Just to point that out as well, that it's not, you're not fighting against.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's exactly. I mean, you pretty much, the zones are outcropping at surface. If we can prove any positive news down underneath cover, you just start from surface and work your way down. So it's a good scenario for sure.
I can see why it's taking a place of priority. To have stuff at surface is always a good start, safe start. Oxide stuff is simple things too, right?
Yeah, it's something that I think people can definitely get their head wrapped around pretty quickly. And, on top of it, like, you mentioned before, our market cap is about 30 million today, right? Well, what can we do to support that valuation?
Yeah.
So that we can go out and test concepts at Swift and Carlin East. Cause I guarantee we're going to have holes that are missed. Like, I've been part of multiple discoveries in my career. So is Mike. You rarely, if ever, hit it on the first hole. It's very rare. But if you're doing it right, you're going to hone in on where you're seeing the right things. You start getting stronger alteration or mineralization, and maybe 2 holes or 5 holes or 10 holes, you smack into it, and that's when it takes off. So what we would like to see is we'd like to, we think Selena has that ability to kind of show that, hey, this, we're adding value. This, we're doing exciting work. And that gives us a bit of freedom to go out and drill holes at Swift, drill holes at Carlin East, and advance those projects without feeling like kind of all the eyes are focused on, everyone's expectations are 100% focused just on those 2 projects, which are still very early stage, right?
And they're somewhat more esoteric. They're more niche, or, you really have to know Nevada to kind of understand them in some ways. A lot of people can kind of wrap their head around an oxide gold deposit at surface.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, there's a reason that we had 12 million in orders in the first 7 days on our IPO, right? I think we were able to get across just how big the blue sky was at some of these projects.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, everyone circled back to, I really like what you're doing at Selena, kind of thing. Like, these are great, these are really great. And they have that potential that could really, change the company in pretty significantly. But Selena is that very, not obvious, but a very, very simple concept that everyone can tag a value on. And there's a lot of good examples of what the value could be, right? Already operating or ready to be sold in Nevada. So I think it's it's been good for us.
You can plug a lot of holes in there too. Again, right? Talk about
for our drilling contract. I mean, that's certainly the drilling contract. We can flex our muscles the most at Salina out of any of them. Right?
Would you do RC? You do a lot of RC drilling there, I guess.
Yeah, we're above the water table. So the big thing with RC is if you get below the water table, you really run the risk of downhole contamination, which would just be a simple, essentially you can hit a zone. And if you have water, if you're in the water table, gold is trapped in the fines, the very fine clays and dust, essentially, if you want to call it that are within that rock. So when you hammer in there with an RC bit and just shatter everything, it releases those fines into the water and they can drift down hole and you can end up smearing your grades down large intervals. So RC is an incredibly useful exploration tool. If you're above the water table, you can certainly drill off a resource with RC and then just pepper it in with core to make sure you validate the resource. You start getting into like Swift or Carlin East. If we have any success there, what we would then do is switch to core tails, which means we drill an RC pre-collar. We case that collar with steel pipe down to maybe 1,500 feet. And then the last 500 to 1,000 feet of the hole, we drill with core. That means that we've eliminated the bad ground conditions above, so you're not getting the hole caving in on yourself. And you can drill that first 1,500 feet I can drill it for a fraction of the price. And then we finish it off with core, which no one can doubt the quality of a core value, right? You drill core through a target and you hit, you can't doubt it. With an RC hole, certainly if you drilled a 3,000 foot hole, you're in the water table and you hit 20 meters of 10 grams, there's always that question, okay, well, is that real? Or is it 2 meters of 20 grams? It's tough to say, right? So I think you have to, depending on the target, you'd certainly have to be careful. And if we have a good hole at Swift or Carlin East, we'll follow up with a core twin before we'd even release the data.
Well, and I just mean about at Salina too, right? Because that's just RC with the shallow targets too, right? Like oxide domain.
Yep. Yeah. You can, RC chips are great, especially in oxide systems, they can be sometimes so altered that they're just clay, right? So RC is a perfect way to come in, hammer in, see what you can get out of it. And then you kind of go from there.
Well, and the clay can be one of the things that becomes a problem with the heap leach circuits, right? So
yeah, certainly. It was a problem at Pan, that's for sure, about 50 kilometers away. I know they struggled with their clays and stuff. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Well, good to know the things that can go wrong. Sometimes you see these management teams in Vancouver and something's not working and they don't know why, or it takes a while to figure it out. It can be really frustrating to have that. And it's just basic stuff to some people, but it's
well, it's tough. It can be very basic, but at the same time, it's just such a tough business, I think, kind of thing, like you're right. Like it is actually a very simple concept if you make a discovery of how to advance it, how you should do it, right? But there's so many things that come in that factor into that can kind of throw a wrench in the wheels, whether it's shareholders or someone making a hostile takeover or,
it's usually something at the drill bit. It's at the drill rig. Something's going wrong at the drill rig. Somebody colored in the wrong place or they're using the wrong drill type,
Exactly. Well, rarely ever, if ever, does, it's tough because you're only as good as your last drill hole, right? And rarely, if ever, does the deposit and the resource end up meeting the expectations of the shareholders, of management, all that kind of stuff. And it's just the nature of the business, right? You drill into it, hey, this could be 5 million ounces. And you end up realizing it's 2.5. That could still be a damn good deposit. But if you haven't messaged it appropriately and set expectations appropriately to the market and stuff like that, you could have something that's really exciting that ends up falling flat because someone was expecting twice as good. So I think we're trying, like at Salina, right? Like I think there's serious potential there. Do I think it's going to be a 10 million ounce deposit? Probably not. But probably not. But anywhere, below that, obviously, anywhere in that range as an oxide deposit in Nevada is incredibly valuable. So we're not, we're just trying to make sure that we define scale first, then work our way into, okay, what could this thing be worth? And are we going to be the ones to advance it, or are we going to find a partner that can do it better?
And people talk about those dollar per ounce multiples and takeover scenarios and stuff.
Sure.
And I love to just point out, people think, a high grade system is going to have a bigger premium. Well, we talked about it, right? If it's down 1,000 feet or down 1,000 meters, watch out, right?
No, absolutely.
Margin matters.
Yeah, Long Canyon was one of the last big open pit pittable deposits that's been found in Nevada, right, lately. Mike was actually his team was the other team that found, a couple million ounces of actual open pittable material. Yeah. But they were like $250 an ounce, I think. I mean, you can do the math on it, but they were well over a few $100. But you can have, for example, the Cove, the CSD Gap deposit, with the dewatering that was required and the fact that it needed to be milled, it was 1.6 million ounces at 12 grams per ton. But at the end of the day, at I think $1,500,
$80 maybe.
It was $145 million NPV, right? A discounted NPV. So you start getting into those economics, and that's where I think our company, I'd like to stay away from. I've done multiple resources. I led the PEA, it's the CSD gap. There's certainly value in doing all that work, but our company, that deposit was valued far higher 6 holes in when we were hitting 30 meters of 8-9 grams, right?
The Lassonde curve, the classic Lassonde curve. Yeah. It's that simple.
I probably sound like a broken record. I hit on that all the time, but that project was worth more in the early stages, and it's still a great, I'm not meaning, our team found it, so it's a great
but pass it on. Let somebody else do the boring work.
It's going to be mine, no doubt. I know that, somebody's going to mine that deposit, and, as gold keeps on ripping up. But I'd rather.
That'll be going for 20 years. These are decades of mine life that we're talking about, right? So.
And sometimes good explorers don't make good producers, right? Like my mindset, the way my brain works, the tedious kind of okay, well, can we? I remember we were doing the PEA at Premier. Even they'd be like, the engineer got super excited because he's like, I found a way to shave 2 pennies off of our milling cost.
Yes.
And everyone was like high-fiving. This is a big deal.
Yeah.
And, I was kind of sitting there being like, oh man, really? Like this is, but it's just a different world, right? Like production, there's a lot of value in it. And I think once you get past that development stage on the Lassonde curve again, that's where the full value gets, added to that project, right? But I'm perfectly happy to sell it at what would be, some people might consider a discount, but we'd rather move that into someone's hands that does it every day.
And if you can have a carried interest too, you talked about having a 40% stake on something, if that can be a carried interest and they're spending the 10 million, 50 million to do the development,
we're able to shave pennies, and no way, absolutely.
Yes, please. That's a great place. And all of a sudden it's Ridgeline royalties.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Premier did a good job. They spun out a royalty company out of Premier 10 years ago.
Great Bear's doing it too, right? Yeah. It's a well-trod path.
Yeah, so there's a ton of value in it. Every deposit that I've worked on has had a different point where the value hit its highest. It wasn't always 6 holes in, but I think I was lucky enough to be a part of over 12 million ounces of discovery with Premier, right? And over about 10 years, mostly just started as a junior geo, fly on the wall, and then more and more consecutive, running projects, etc. But they were a great team, and you can see, some projects like Cove, I truly think that if we'd tried to sell that 10 holes in, we probably would have gotten more value for it than they can get. Although that's
quicker too. It would have been crystallized value, right? Years ago.
Yeah.
So,
but at the same time, gold's going to $2,000. I'm probably going to put my foot in my mouth pretty soon, I'm sure, on it. So, but
you'll find more good opportunities too, right? That's the other thing is you get the one and done and move on to the next thing. It's
exactly. So for us, we want to stay in that firmly in that discovery side of the Lassonde curve, and hopefully, obviously strong gold markets make that a very easy statement to make. Times change, and you got to adjust to that, as the gold market sways. But that's where we are right now.
And I see phase 2 drilling 1,000 meters planned for Chinchilla and Juniper at Salina here.
Yeah, and I think we ended up doing about 1,100. So
cool.
We just wrapping that up. So results will be about 3 weeks out.
And how was it doing drilling while you were doing the IPO, right? I would think some lawyers would tell you not to do that because it's, kind of a moving target potentially if you get hot results.
You bet. What we did is we actually, in our prospectus, we disclosed the phase 1 drilling, which we completed in June. So we fully disclosed those results. What that allowed us to do was then we could at least market the phase 1 results as here's what we think is happening. And then drilling during the IPO wasn't an issue as long as we were not, we didn't announce that we were drilling until after we closed the IPO.
Yeah. Bullish.
Or right when I think the day before actually, but the lawyers, they were pretty much like, yeah, look, here's your window. If you miss it, you're in trouble. You need to, you need to do this right. You can't pre-market the IPO. You can't do that. And we didn't do any of that, but
good.
The whole point was that we wanted to, right out the gate, we wanted to have some results, and we're kind of betting on that we can deliver on that. hopefully it doesn't fall flat. So,
well, and even if it does, it's 1,000 meters. Was that kind of 100-meter holes or?
Yeah, anywhere from 75 to 125 meter holes.
Oh yeah, wonderful. I love those depths. Yeah, it's a pretty high confidence program, right? And you can get a few kicks at the can with that kind of a setup too, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's trying to bit of proof of concept for the larger kind of potential of the project. So
amazing. And here's that same one we were talking about on the first slide, looking down at the big pit from the hills up on your ground there.
Yeah,
what a spot to be.
Well, and you look at the trend, right? Look at how everything's on that northwest orientation, all those red deposits. Well, that's only one side of the trend, right? Leeville's the only deposit on the other side of the trend. And what happened is that Little Boulder Basin, like 15 million years after the gold formed, that basin tore apart. So technically, the Leeville deposit would have been sitting right beside Genesis Blue Star, kind of open like an accordion. Yep. So everything that happened got ripped apart after mineralization formed, which meant that, you know, everyone focused on the northwest side, the main post-gen fault corridor, largely because it was shallow, right? Everything got pushed up on that side of the basin, which meant it eroded down quicker, and you ended up with the ore right at surface or very near surface, right? So it was like very, you know, just like Salina, it's like, hey, oxide material right at surface, you know, it's an obvious thing. But Leeville was discovered in the 90s, and it's on the opposite side of the trend, or the opposite side of the basin. And that same structural corridor that hosts the Leeville deposit, the Lynn and Four Corners Fault Zone, I mean, we've mapped that all the way across our project. And we have gravity that supports it, geochem that supports it. So in our eyes, we feel that we own the other, you know, let's call it the other half of that trend. We own 39 square kilometers. So.
Wow. And sense for depth to those units?
We had thought it was going to be, we thought we could hit it 600 meters, and we hit it in 800 meters. So 1901, if you click a few ahead on the arrows there, I think it'll walk you through down at the bottom. If we go to the next slides, it should
800 meter holes. I love it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and I started my career in Red Lake, right? And I think you got to do a couple more clicks here. I'm giving it's the whole song and dance. But 800 meters in Red Lake is nothing, right? I remember drilling like 1,800 meter holes, and you know, still hitting stuff that was considered interesting. So, you know, this is our mag survey, and what's kind of exciting about our mag survey, you can see the bright white, the gold. If you zoom in, the gold gold strike intrusion and the Little Boulder Basin intrusion there. Those are bright white. Those are old, great big thick intrusions with that are I believe they're Jurassic in age, and they are right at surface, so they show up as a bright mag high because it's more obvious. All of the mineralization, both at Genesis Blue Star and Gold Strike, crops out. It's forming right on the margins of that intrusion. Leeville's the same way. It's right on the edge of the Vivian Sill, which when everything pulled apart, same thing. It pulled that apart. The Vivian Sill was part of that Little Boulder Basin intrusion, and then it got torn up. Well, if you look to ours, look at that orange anomaly that's cutting through our crash zone. We did a mag inversion on that. We have a buried intrusion that's a couple thousand feet down. Here I go switching to Imperial. But that is showing the same northwest trend as the Gold Strike and Little Boulder Basin intrusion, northwest, cutting along. And that's where all of our geochemistry on the project just lights up like a Christmas tree. So we called it the crash zone because everything was smacking into each other. We're a bunch of boring geologists, so we're pretty unoriginal with our names. But you know, so our first step was we drilled 1901 and 1902 to prove the depth to lower plate. The next step now is stepping up into the crash zone, which actually we believe is probably where everything's kind of coming together. That's you know, golden soils.
Would you expect to get much soil response from stuff?
Well, it's much more muted, right? So because, you know, at Carlin East or at Salina, where it's right at, you know, we're only 100 feet. We're getting you know, zone that's anywhere from right below surface to.
But at least you're not in a basin. You know, up here, at least you're on the ridge.
Yeah, no, we're in bedrock, and you know, we're seeing consistent. What I look for more is I think I look for consistency of the zone. So are you seeing it tracking up structures, the same structure for a few kilometers? It might not be terribly wide, but is it leaking up those structures? Yeah, and that's, you know, that's more of what I'm concerned with. I think in the next one we have arsenic, and it shows a similar trend. You're seeing the, you know, I was wrong. Go straight to gold. Sorry, or straight to the. That's where that's the pad that we drilled. That's where that view is from.
Do you do any deep imaging? Like you mentioned gravity. What about any like seismic or like any of the magnetotelluric type stuff that, you know, can get really crustal scale imaging?
That stuff is really, I know that Barrick and Newmont did that stuff in the past. It's just really like, you know, seismic, all that stuff would be really cost prohibitive. You know, kind of thing. Too little bit too rich for our what we're doing right now. But what we can do is downhole. You can do downhole geophysics. What I'd love to do is what's something that hasn't been done a lot in Nevada is actually working on Acoustic Zoom does a really cool kind of like downhole density. They can actually measure density
Cool.
I don't know if you've seen their technology. They won, I
No.
think they won like the Disrupt mining contest or got like second place.
Yeah.
But, Carlin type systems have huge density contrast with the surrounding rock, right? Well, if you could go in and if you could use that downhole tooling, if you had 2 or 3 discovery holes and you could actually put that, essentially measure density from downhole from within the zone itself, I think you could potentially define a bit better of a 3D view of what you thought was going on, which in that case should drastically increase your targeting percentage, right? And when you're drilling those kind of deep holes, it could be really valuable. So I'd like to see if we can apply that. It comes down to, I know like their tooling, for example, might not fit down the holes that we're drilling, like from what I've seen. So I was talking to them last year actually about, how could we make it work, but it's probably going to cost 150 grand to maybe do 3 holes. So that's something that you have to be onto something, I think you have to say, hey, I have a discovery. I'm going to drill it off next spring. And I want to do this downhole testing, which you have to do in real time, right? You got to do it when the hole's being drilled. So it's kind of tricky, right? So, but
this whole ridge coming up into this whole area, hey,
it gets pretty gnarly up there. Mike and I did a lot of soil sampling up through there, and it kind of almost killed us in 2019. So,
well, and it's begging for some deep holes, though. I can see why you guys would want to, go up.
Yeah, we've pretty much staked the entire. We picked up the original land package, which was about half that length along there, and then we staked the rest. And so we own 100%.
Oh, well done.
Or anything up to the north. And we do believe it's getting progressively deeper as you go up there. But I think if you prove the concept at the main Carlin East area, I think it adds a lot of value to the whole package, right?
And you think it's getting deeper, but who knows? Maybe there's some cross-cutting something, and it's accordion back and forth. This, I don't know.
The Horst and Graben geology is like the most classic type in Nevada, right? So if something pops down, it has to pop back up somewhere else. So it's pretty, so there's a good chance. We just haven't had enough time with it being 40 kilometers. We just haven't had the time to get up there and get too much work done in that northern half.
It's an elephant. How do you eat an elephant here?
It's pretty, we're really excited about Carlin East. It's got a lot of potential.
Wow.
Yeah.
And where were the holes that you got from the 80s that you relogged the core and all that?
That was actually at our Swift project. There's no drill. Okay. There's from what we can tell, Newmont may have drilled a few holes, but from verbal conversation with a few guys that actually were with Newmont at the time, they know it was only a few 100 feet deep. They were just looking for shallow stuff. So they would have needed to drill a 500 meter drill hole, 400 meter drill hole just to get into the target range.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and the grade shells on this, there's a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we hit. I think I can't remember the exact composite, but I mean, we hit like 245 meters of a half gram silver in the bottom of the hole. So I mean, it's showing that there's smoke. You're hitting widespread, very low grade trace elements. We hit gold, we hit arsenic, we hit half a gram silver. We're seeing all those things just very low grade. So, what it said to us is, okay, we're in the right general area, but we need to be heading up into what we think is a stronger part of the system, which would be a kilometer to the north in the crash zone, we think.
And alteration types and stuff too at the core, were you?
Classic like silicification, decalcification, again, it was all very weak, right? If we'd have seen really strong, we should have seen better grades, higher grades than we did. So getting PPB gold, 30, 50 ppm arsenic, it's low grade. It's not, you want to be seeing, I'd like to be seeing, if I was in the inner alteration halo, I'd like to be seeing greater than a tenth of a gram gold, somewhere in that 0.1 to 0.5 over wide intercepts with, 400 ppm arsenic, 200 ppm arsenic. That would tell you that, hey, we're really close. What we hit in 1901 suggests, all right, we could be anywhere within a kilometer, 2 kilometers of something bigger.
Yeah.
And we need to, we need to be vectoring into the heart of the system.
Oh man. Oh boy. Swinging for the fences with this one. Hey.
Oh, wow. We are. Yeah, no, for sure. But, one good hole is, changes the entire company, right? So
yes. But what was it, hole 70 or something like that at 4 Mile? It's a lot of deep holes.
No, for sure. And what we're trying to do is we're learning from what public knowledge there is about Leeville and all these different areas, and just trying to figure out, okay, well, if that's what they're hitting here, how do we project that onto the property?
Well, and some deep imaging again too. The magnetotellurics right? It's good for conductive response at great depth, right?
Yeah. The only thing is with the MT with Carlin type systems typically doesn't get a great response because there's not
Okay.
enough of us. There's not enough of that really magnetic sulfide response. You just don't get it. It's a very
Okay.
pyrite dominated system. So in that case, it would work great for other types of systems, the MT, I think for the cost and the kind of inconclusive results you would typically get for that. It's, I think the gravity is huge. Gravity tells you where the structures are. It can also tell you if you're getting a huge package of all bright red in your gravity, saying, hey, this looks really shallow. And then in the heart of it is, along the structures is an anomaly or, an embayment in that gravity saying, well, for some reason, this looks way deeper right here. Well, it might not be deeper rock. It might actually just be that the density has been completely smacked by a gold system. And that's what's showing that change across the gravity. So it's far from a perfect system. That's why you got to layer all the data in, right? You use the gravity, the geochem, the mapping.
Thank you.
I think when you can't use any one of those to make a decision with your drilling, but when all of those layer together, then you start getting some bullseyes.
Any hydro geochem really for that kind of?
I don't like hydro geochem, but not because I think the science from a very, I guess you could say the science makes sense from a very hypothetical perspective. Like it's real. The issue that I find with the hydrogeochem is, when you got active groundwater systems in large aquifers, it doesn't allow you to zone in, right?
Yeah, so it's really diffuse. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, hydrogeochem lets you say, okay, this 50 square kilometer or 100 square kilometer area looks like it's better than this 50 square kilometer area. But when you're getting down to drill targeting, you need to be mapping at that 1 to 5,000, 1 to 10,000 scale. That's the scale of data that you require to actually make discoveries, and the hydrogeochem just doesn't get you there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for all the information. Impressive stuff.
You can tell me to shut up anytime. I'm starting to nerd out a little bit. So
no, it's good. Glad to hear you about the MT with Carlin systems being, failure to launch there. That's duly noted.
I'm pretty far from a geophysics expert by any stretch, but that's been my experience in Nevada for sure. Is that it probably isn't worth the cash and the time that you put into it.
Well, and downhole methods, I guess too, right?
Well, they can be great. Like, I mean, it really depends. Like, you can do. I hope that the technology gets better because right now it's mostly cost, right? Like, sure, Barrick or Newmont, any one of those groups can come out and say, sure, we'll spend $25,000 to do this downhole imaging. But for a group like us, I can drill 4 more drill holes at Salina for that $25,000, right? So is my money best spent doing one downhole imaging, or is it better to go out and try to just go drill some more holes, which typically is the way you make discoveries, right? So it's tough, right? I think as the technology improves, hopefully the cost will go down and then it'll become more available to the masses, small groups like us, hopefully then more, then I think it would actually start making more discoveries.
Speaking of nerding out, I'm sure there's some people who get really excited by this diagram.
Well, I drew this in 2019 or 2018. Sorry, I drew this section. So what it is a compilation.
Before you had this hole.
Yes.
Well done.
So we drew this. Mike and I sat down and we said, okay, this is, so where that on the right-hand side of the section, that's what Leeville looks like essentially, right? That's the continuation of the Leeville system. And then on the other side, you got, for in this case, it's the Rodeo mine. So what's really exciting is Newmont drilled in the 1990s. They drilled vertical holes down into the basin. They're like 6,000 foot holes. Yeah. And they hit the exact same host rocks that host Leeville on the right-hand side and they host Rodeo on the left.
Wow.
And then on top of that, they were hitting like 5.9 meters. I think if you go back to it, like they're
26
meters and 26 grams.
Yep.
Well, that's in the deepest part of the basin. That's where everything dropped into, like a big trap door, right? You go up onto the Leeville side, those same host rocks are continuing up. You have Leeville to the south. You have these holes that are to your west, like kind of thing. Like no matter which way you look, you go other than to the north where no one knows what's going on. You have ore grade intercepts. And big gold deposits. So for us, it's, it's kind of a no brainer, right? It's like, all right, and we didn't even get into
a big swing though. It's a big swing.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I think this is what this section is what I raised $1.5 million on.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I believe that.
Kind of thing. And just saying like, it's kind of that it's like, and we've always tried to be really open about like, we're not trying to bullshit anybody. This is a big swing. It could absolutely miss. There's absolutely every chance it could. But what we're doing is we're reducing that risk with the drilling and doing all that baseline work. And I mean, it's a very simple concept. It's just a matter now of executing and hopefully hitting something.
It's a meaningful concept too, like for Nevada.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, the thing is it's not a groundbreaking idea, like by any stretch. Everybody knows,
Yeah.
that Leeville's on that other side of that basin. I just, for some reason, I mean, you look at big companies. I heard a really great analog from I think it was Anglo Gold, his VP, and he pretty much their model was is they're going out worldwide, their exploration team, and they're looking for projects in the donut of neglect. Now, have you ever heard this, guys?
No, I love it.
No, I'm not taking credit for this idea.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. I love the way he said it. But he says every world-class deposit has a donut of neglect around it.
Yeah.
And what it comes down to is a lot of it is the geos behind it, right? So you got your mine geos, like a rodeo, for example, right?
Yeah.
There's he said the donut of neglect was usually about anywhere from 4 to 6 kilometers around in a circle around that deposit. So you had the mine geos saying, well, I'm not going to drill the extension of the deposit. We have 30 years of mine life. Why
who's going to drill
that?
a 6,000 foot hole to hit 5 meters at 26 grade? What?
Right,
No.
But like even the known step outs, like, hey, we got 20 million ounces. Why in the world do we do exploration?
Yeah.
Then you get the exploration geos who all have it in their head. They have this idea of what an exploration geo is, and they're standing on a mountain with their wind blowing in the hair, and the hair blowing in the wind, and they're finding some deposit on some far flung continent, right? And in reality, so they're like, well, I'm not going to drill 2 kilometers from an existing mine. That's not even a discovery. I won't get any credit for that.
Yeah, that's just boring brownfields.
Yeah, that's just boring.
Easy.
Yeah, right. And he said what happens is he said to a T, almost every big deposit they've ever worked on, they've made more discoveries in that donut of neglect because for that reason. It's just no one touched it from either side. And over the years, it just got forgotten about. And I think that's exactly what Carlin East is. It's 4 kilometers from Leeville. It's 2.5 kilometers from Goldstrike. It's in that donut of neglect, and it just got forgotten about. And when we talked to Newmont Geos, who were like retired and stuff, and I said, hey, do you remember that old project up to the north? And, oh yeah, that's 5,000 feet down. I mean, why did you pick that project up? And it's like, okay, well, can you explain why it's 5,000 feet down?
Yeah.
And the answer was usually, well, everybody says it's 5,000 feet down.
Yes.
And then I'd find out that, maybe they hadn't even worked on the project, but their buddy had told them it was shit. And then you take a step back and you go, like, that's how we saw that opportunity. And so we brought in the ex-chief geophysicist for Newmont. And we said, hey, can you reinterpret the gravity that we have, the gravity data?
Yeah.
And he comes back to us and he said, I think that the lower plate rock is only 1,500, 2,000 feet down. And we were like, well, how do you know? And he's like, because I did the gravity for Leeville. And I did the gravity for, he's like, I know the gravity signature. I know what it looks like. And, and we went in and drilled it, and we hit, we hit a little deeper than that, just a little bit, but nothing crazy, right? I think we hit 2,600 vertical feet instead of 2,000. So, so that's what kind of got us, it starts getting you really excited, right? Is it's not the fact that the potential's not there. This thing fell into that donut of neglect, never got touched for 20 years after that. And I think we're coming in and kind of taking a fresh look at it now.
Well, and I love those misconceptions too that are just taken as gospel. And it's like, well, how do you know it's 6,000 feet down? It's like, well, because everybody says it is.
That's exactly most dangerous word, right? Because that's how it's always been done. Is like one of the most dangerous statements ever made. And
in market side too, we just take things at face value, and accept those kind of conventional wisdom. And some of that, there's value in some of that stuff, but you got to check. Right. And you trust but verify, all these kinds of things. Investors are always trying to do that on management teams and on projects and stuff like this. Right. And to have management and to have, juniors that are doing that as a big part of their strategy and their exploration concept, checking these assumptions it's a good alignment. You'll probably win a lot of favor with your shareholder base, regardless if you hit here or not, just for, fact checking. It's the consensus opinion on this.
No, for sure. And I mean, it's a tricky thing. And the decision to drop that project was made, I think, like 15 years ago. And then it's been in private hands for years and years and nothing getting done with it, right? So, I mean, the guys that decided, I don't doubt for a second that the decision to drop that ground was probably made by an accountant in Denver, by Newmont, right? Because it was like, wow, we haven't done anything with this for 10 years. Why are we holding it? Kind of thing. Because I've talked to a lot of geos also that have worked in that general area, and they're like, wow, that's that's definitely a solid concept. Hopefully it works out. Love to see, blah, blah, blah. But So yeah, you get with big companies and just decisions get made that are not necessarily being made by the people on the ground that actually, like if you'd probably asked a lot of geos at Newmont back then, they probably still would have said, no way, don't get rid of that ground. But, so yeah, I think it's pretty cool. It's exciting for us. I think it's, Mike and I both made discoveries in off trend, areas that were not, McCoy Cove is not considered, a classic Carlin type deposit yet. It's had 5 million ounces of historic production, and the resource is almost to 2 million ounces at 12 grams now. So that's a 7 million ounce system plus over 100 million ounces of silver historically mined.
Wow.
So you look at that, and then the discovery Mike and his team made at Gold Standard, and you start realizing there's a lot of potential in Nevada that falls outside of that box that has been put around Carlin type deposits. And I think we're just coming in and, like you said, we're just fact checking them and say we're no guarantee that we're going to find a damn thing, but we're certainly going in. And I'd like to think that we found enough gold in Nevada so far, Mike and I, that we at least know what we're looking for, right? So we're testing the different concepts.
Wouldn't it be nice to have a regional geophysical, gravity survey or mag or something, some regional work?
Yeah, and you know what? The big companies have it. They've got it all done. But it's private, right? It's not public knowledge. I think that a lot more discoveries would be made in Nevada and in the US in general if there was a public database that could be relied on. Because I know that there's 40, the downhole data for all 40 drill holes at Salina. I know who has them, and they've pretty much told me to take a hike because we're not getting it, kind of thing. And it's like, it's not public data. And so that just disappears, right? And it's, I know there's good data that we could glean from that and help us make better decisions on where we are drilling, and stuff.
Well, and that's why it needs to be maybe a strategic alliance at some point where it's like, okay, data sharing agreements and
we did that. With Barrick, we actually traded all of our surface data that we had on the project for all the surface data they had on the project. It was great. And I really like working with the Barrick team because it was no cost to anybody. We just shared the data. And they know perfectly well. They just said, I said, is this going to cost anything? And they said, no, but if you find something, I hope we're the first people that you call. And it's like, that's the kind of stuff that there needs to be more of, I think, in Nevada. Because, they definitely saved me 200 grand, which for a small company like us is a game changer for that project. We were able to go out and collect other data. And I will certainly call them first, if we do find something, because they've helped us get
500 meters. 500 meters isn't bad,
Nope.
And
yeah, it looks good. I think just a matter of going in and with a couple good holes this year.
And that hole's collared from the ridge, the top of the hill anyways. So, if by the time you're going in the valley, you talk about trying a mining scenario, go in, there might be 200 or 300 meters of relief just from the top of the hill to the valley, cut off some of the distance in terms of building underground access and stuff.
Yeah. And then the next step for us is if we can get some more disturbance. We only have 5 acres to work with on our permit. So if you could build indefinite roads, you could certainly spiral down into the valley and cut 500 feet off of the depth of your hole.
Cool.
Just by cutting in on it. So yeah, that's something we can do in the future if we can get a plan of operations and make a discovery.
Impressive. Wow. very
I'm glad
good
you're
work.
Getting excited. Glad you're getting excited more. This is the first time we've actually got to walk through it. So.
Oh, really? Okay, great. I was wondering if we should wrap it up and try and rush through it in the end or something like that. But
no, this is good.
The baby's still sleeping over here, so we got a window of opportunity. And that's 1,000-meter hole. So that's 2 holes. You're talking about maybe.
I think we're probably we have enough in there to drill because targets, 500 to 600 meters down. We think maybe, we think we can actually hit it shallower than we hit in 1901 now that we know how to better target it. So we think we can hit around 600 meters. Cool. But we'll probably drill the first hole. You got to drill past your target to make sure you're 100% through it. So that might be an 800-meter hole, which means, really what we'll do is we'll drill that first hole. If we have any success at all, we've got enough money in the treasury that we can comfortably follow up with, another couple thousand meters and a few more drill holes if we wanted to.
And that partner of yours, who's the drilling company, they are capable of they got the rigs for this? Yep.
They got an RD10, which is a rig that can drill. We drilled 2,900 feet with it last year. On a good day with the wind behind your back, you can maybe get it to 3,300 feet. So it's a pretty good rig.
Beautiful. And that's, I guess, right where, that's not far off from where that picture on the front page must be, eh?
Yep. That's pretty close. Yeah. If you were to go down south along that ridge line, that's where that picture would be.
Oh, beautiful. I hope you can call her up there and hit something surprising.
You and me both, man.
Wow. Shout out Verify. Thanks you guys for a great you know.
Yeah, they got a pretty great product. Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
awesome.
wonderful.
Hmm.
And
So
I
yeah, I
see
mean, the main,
Q4 for that phase 2 drilling at Crash Zone there.
yeah, we're going to get into it in the first week of October is the plan, and that
Good.
gives us enough time that if we do, you can get prelim gold results in a few weeks to at least know what you're looking at. It won't be final gold results, so we can drill it in October and know what we're looking at by mid to late October, and we can still go in and drill a few holes in November if it looks really good.
And RC casing
Yeah, we're gonna
down
we're
to
gonna RC to roughly 350 to 400 meters, and then
get
we'll
through
core.
the,
Yeah, get through the upper plate rock, that kind of garbage can of,
yeah.
different type of rocks in there, and which is a nightmare to drill through. And then we'll
And you don't want
core.
it sloughing it. You don't want it falling back in on you and all that stuff
Yeah,
too, right? No, you got to
that's
case
that's
that.
that's why we only got to 2,900 feet last year. Is actually the hole started. We got through the end of the lower plate, and it was altered and looking positive from that standpoint. Again, it hit low grade alteration, but we didn't even get into the right. We didn't get into the Popovich and the Roberts Mountain, right? But we lost that hole at 2,900. We actually ended up in the next hole. We drilled to the north of that. Got it to 300 meters, and it was showing even stronger visual alteration. And we ended up losing that hole in the fault zone, cutting across. And so that upper plate is tough rock, and so the best way to go about it is to quickly hammer down through it as quick as you can,
Yep.
case it, and then come in with a core rig so that you can take your time and drill through it.
Well, and anyone who's still here listening to us, there's a bull market going on, whether you're probably aware. And in those bullish times when all kinds of juniors are getting funding, bad things can happen in terms of availability of field crews, and lab processing times can blow out really badly. So there's the risk of a lot of juniors really being caught flat-footed or unprepared for doing the field work that they planned on doing, right? So
Yep.
very important for you to have that drill crew on lock.
Yeah, no, it's a huge competitive advantage for us. And other things that we try to do to I guess align ourselves with our partners, like even our drill lab, I prepaid our assay fees for 3 months. They ended up saying for that we got essentially priority treatment and great pricing, right? Below what I would consider market pricing, right? So it's just little things like that you can do to make sure you're at the top of everyone's list.
Yeah.
When things go crazy like they're starting to do. It just kind of gives us that edge. So
well done. The importance of being there.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah,
some good exposure here too, it looks like.
That's we trenched across that, and I can't even remember the numbers now. We hit significant intercepts of low grade gold and silver across hundreds of feet at surface at Swift. We actually got it in the Verify project somewhere in here.
Yeah,
I think I probably mentioned it, but
beautiful.
Escaped me. But yeah, so it's showing a lot of good things.
Again, large, 50 square kilometers.
Yeah, it's our biggest project. Like you look at 50 square kilometers, that itself is like a mining district. Like it's in certain areas next to the woods, you'd consider that an entire mining district that might have 5 companies operating within it. We own the whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
The settings again. Just look at the setting, right? The next hill over from 4 Mile.
Yeah, I mean, you have 4 Mile.
Trend.
4 Mile is you got 4 Mile behind the hill from Cortez. Then you got the valley. You got Pipeline on the other side of the valley, and then we're right on the other side of Pipeline. Right, we're like 7.5 kilometers away. These systems cluster together. And what I always really hit on with this is that you look at that and look at like Gold Acres. That little Gold Acres pit. That is only that was like 750,000 ounces. Of relatively low grade pit that was actually mined before Pipeline. And then you look at the little red dot above to the north of Cortez. That's the Cortez Hills. That's the original Cortez mine. That was like 1 million ounces. It started mining in the 1960s. All of these big systems have these little kind of tiny zones that are all around the margins of it that were originally discovered first. And then you go up to our project, and there's the Elder Creek mine. I mean, that was a 60,000 ounce open pit mined in the 1990s. And the only reason it ran out of gold, well, it didn't run out of gold, they just went to refractory instead of oxide. So they quit mining it. That's right on the edge of the project. And the Cortez structural corridor cuts across our project. We see it in gravity. We've mapped it. And the next structural block, north, you see how those north-south blocks are all kind of bounding those systems? Well, the next big block over is our project. Yeah, and so we had that, Swift DMX guys pointed that out to me, and I think Barrick had dropped it during, you remember when they were trying to cut their costs big time? They were really working on debt reduction. And
hard to remember now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it feels like a long time ago.
They're getting credit upgrades now.
So no, I mean, they've done a great job, but this is one of those projects that shook out of the bottom of Barrick during that debt reduction time, right? Because I mean, it's almost 75, 80 grand a year just to hold the ground. And, you know, if you're not doing anything with it, it's just a liability, and it fell out of Barrick. So it was a really good pickup. And we've doubled the land package since we optioned it from EMX. So we did a deal with a local rancher, brought in another 5,000 acres of fee land, which isn't even BLM claim land. So we don't have to pay to hold that ground. It's free. But he owns it as private ground. All we do is pay him a lease. And
is that patented ground?
It's not patented. No, it'd be federal fee land. So it's actually the federal government traded ranchers ground that they had in return for essentially like federally administered fee land. And so it's private ground. And you know, where he's able to lease the mineral rights to us. He has, we have the surface rights for any mining purposes, but other than that, he still has full access for any ranching or anything like that he wants to do.
Looks like hard country up there, though. You know,
it's not bad.
Okay.
There's a really good road network through it. I think if you go to the next slide or a few more slides ahead, it shows it's almost as good it's better road access than Salina, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, it's closer. You know, it's only, if we go a few more, this just is course going
beautiful
through about
what a pit.
all the
Look
different
at that
mines. Yeah, and that's looking right at pipeline. And then you look at the bigger picture on the next guy, the pipeline mine again. You know, it was found right after, after they'd already been mining the Gold Acres pit, right?
Love it.
And then that's all the roads that cut across the property. So I mean, it's pretty good access.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's an old barite mine just below it too. And there's a well-maintained all-season road that cuts right through the project that services the barite mine. So it works out kind of perfect.
Yeah, I can understand wanting to go out there and do some work.
Yeah, it's pretty good access.
Wow.
And it can still be pretty steep country and stuff, but you know, it's not too bad of a walk. You know, an hour walk up the hillside, you're into whatever you want to see.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been working on, is this fabric, right? This structural fabric. And what's kind of cool is if you go to the next slide, it keeps the structure on there, but it adds the gravity, I believe.
And you're doing this off of geophysics interpretation or surface mapping?
Mapping, a mix of everything, right? So we use this, we surface map it, then compare it to our gravity model, and then we also use our surface geochemistry to track those structures undercover when they can't be mapped.
Wow.
And but yeah, so what was really interesting is look where all the drill holes are. They're almost all in the blue and green.
Yeah.
All of the red and orange, that's shallow lower plate that's never been drill tested. So that's beautiful. Cortez corridor that cuts across. It's 18 square kilometers. It reminds me a lot of like the LP fault corridor that Great Bear talks about, right? This isn't something that just would host one individual thing. It's 18 square kilometers. You could host multiple deposits within that, along that mineralized corridor. So it's never had a drill hole into it, and the only hole that into the lower plate within that corridor. And there's an old open pit mine on one edge of the corridor at Elder Creek, and there's a drill hole where that star is. That's the core that we own, and they hit at 727 meters down. So, but they hit on the down drop side of the structural block, right? Yeah. So I think if you go to the next, there might be a couple slides.
I love it. You start getting up in the hills, right? And things can be pushed up. It can be.
We got some serious pop-up blocks, and that's our magnetics that we did. Again, those light greens within the corridor that we've mapped dike swarms all the way up that northwest corridor. We think there's buried little plugs of intrusion on either side. And then if you look, the red is the Goat Peak intrusion to the northwest, and the Gold Acre stock is to the southeast. So that corridor is being fed by two intrusions on either side of our project.
Hey, juicy, let's go.
Exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah. So we're, it's probably technically our strongest project from when you're looking at the whole picture, when you're seeing, when you're, like just putting it all together and untapped potential. I think Swift is certainly my favorite.
And sense of depth on the target horizon here,
Yeah, the gravity would. So they've now that we know that the lower plate is at 727 meters. So our geophysicists kind of back calculated and said, okay, well, if that's what the gravity signature is at 727,
Yep.
then that means on the footwall side of that structure and what was the bright red gravity signature, that's closer to 300 to 400 meters. There's
Cool.
major significant offset along the DDF and Swift fault zones. So
Great. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I can. That would be the thing, right?
yeah, it's trying to get into the shallower rocks. Is if we can hit into stuff that's only 300, 400 meters down, that's right in the striking distance of any major deposit that's being delineated right now.
And you're in a position where you would drill those holes yourself.
Yeah, we're going to drill them in like 3 weeks. If you go to the next, maybe next slide, we'll see.
Wonderful.
Yeah, you're thinking same as me here. That's the arsenic again, and these are like, look at how big those arsenic anomalies are. We're seeing up to like four I think 1400 ppm arsenic at surface.
Yeah,
and on average, like those orange and brown zones, those are anywhere from, we're talking 40 to 150 160 ppm arsenic. That is significant bleed up for a system that's covered underneath. So I think the Leeville deposit was in the 100 to 200 ppm arsenic range, so that's fallen right into that range. And if you go, I think the next slide or one more after that, maybe I'm pointing out, that's the Fallen City target. There is the one we're going to be going after first.
Okay.
Oh, that's our trenches. I told you I had trenches in there. So yeah, we had 100 meters of 0.04 gold, which is low, but 323 ppm arsenic, including 15 meters of 0.1. That's some really poor host rocks, and it's still altering. 685 ppm arsenic is incredibly high arsenic across that kind of intercept in a siliciclastic rock, and you can see it's right on the edge of that Cortez corridor, right? So it's just showing what it is it's evidence of fluid flow along that corridor, and it's just altering the rock all the way up to surface. So we just need to track that down into lower plate rocks, and hopefully we'll have some success.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And I think we had another trench that was it might even have been a little better grade, trench 2, I think. Yeah, that was 50 meters of 0.07 with 10 meters of 0.3 gold. So
and the arsenic numbers on those ones too.
They're again pretty high, right? So you'd be the Cove deposit, like CST Gap that we worked on. Again, the ore zone and the refractory grade of 12 grams per ton would have an arsenic range anywhere from usually about 300 to 500, all the way up to into the thousands, right? 5 to 6,000 ppm. But the average was in that 300 to 1,500 ppm. So you're seeing very strong arsenic anomalies coming up along those structures.
And does that mean that there's necessarily like large concentrations of arsenic down in potential gold zones, or?
What it shows is concentrated structurally controlled leakage from a deeper system. So if you have, if you think of like a groundwater system, for example, right, like in an aquifer, if you have gold, in our case, it'd be gold rich fluids that are flowing through the rocks down below. And if those fluids, anytime they intersect one of those structures, you're going to get that arsenic and all those trace elements. They're going to bleed up that structure. It's almost like you get suction, sucking up along those structures from the convection that goes on beneath that.
Well, and would you think that the gold be refractory at depth potentially?
Yeah, based on, I think pretty much almost the entire Cortez Hills pipeline, most of those are all refractory, right? There's definitely oxide components to it, but Gold Rush, 4 Mile, they're all refractory. Everything in this general area is very likely going to be refractory, but the thing that we have going for us is all the other deposits are huge and they're pretty high grade. So if we can prove that we have something in that range, it's not going to be a concern as far as milling.
And all that good stuff that's going on with Barrick and Newmont blending ores and kind of optimizing their different processing across a bunch of different feedstocks and stuff, like.
You bet. Yeah,
fascinating.
And they're a bit of a one-stop shop now, for sure. Like, the days of the Newmont Barrick bidding wars has been reduced a little bit. So, but I think, when we're talking the scale of what we're looking for here, you find something that has 5 million ounce potential, you're going to have more than just Barrick interested in what you're doing. There's Kinross, SSR, Newcrest, Anglo.
And there's going to be a whole bunch of them that are worried about a Barrick monopoly, a Barrick Newmont, market power in Nevada too. So there's a whole bunch of these other ones that are going to be trying to get in.
Yeah, I mean the grade is king with these type of deposits, right? If you can find something that's high enough grade and enough of it, you're going to have a lot of people excited about what you're doing. So you look at that, like that's a picture of the actual core that we have. It's classic decalcified Carlin type alteration. We had up to 2.6 grams gold in individual samples, right? So it's
Yeah.
showing that it's altered strong. And then you look at that drill hole. If you zoom in even more, where that
Oh,
drill
there
hole
it
is,
is. Yeah.
yeah, and that just hit on a down drop block, and we want to be up, and that hit on the edge of that structural corridor. We want to
Yeah.
be up on the footwall side. Everything's been tilted like 30, 40 degrees. So all of those, all those faults have kind of laid over after the mineralization formed and then slid down. So that's like a slide block of that. And so you get up into the Fallen City target area. Our gravity supports it as well, that you're in significantly shallower rock, and we're seeing kilometer scale soils anomalies cropping out along the DDF and Swift faults. So
Beautiful.
it's showing us all the right things.
Scale. Wonderful.
Yeah.
And the goat target here may be a little bit more flat lying even.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is the goat target would be a classic kind of anticline target. There's a large regional anticline that cuts all the way down. And we've mapped it where it outcrops the surface, like 2 miles to the northwest off the property, and it just gently plunges down into our project. And the Elder Creek mine is sitting right there on the edge of it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a large some large regional features in here. Wow.
Yeah, no, it's that's why we get really excited, because if you're saying, what are you looking for? And I'd say, well, geez, like at Swift and Carlin East, I'd say, well, we're looking for 10 million ounce deposits at both of those projects. And we see the scale required to host that scale of deposit at both. So it's just a matter of, problem is a good problem to have, but we have huge land packages. So we have to be very selective about where we put the drill holes, because you could drill and miss and be a kilometer away from 10 million ounces, and you never know, right? And then you run out of money. So we gotta make sure that we're putting the holes in the right spot.
Process. And everything we're talking about here, you're showing good process in terms of the targeting methodology and stuff, right? So
we're trying, yeah.
And these are the faults projected?
Yeah, that's just a couple of those key faults kind of coming through that corridor. But yeah, so we've learned from a lot from making a lot of mistakes, our team in the past, and learning from it. So we're trying to avoid that here.
And are those are different from the ones that are the slips?
Yes. Yeah. So that would be represented. It's kind of not very well. I got it notated a little better. That's an old section, but that would be the Cortez structural corridor cutting across.
Right.
Yeah. That last section beforehand, I actually got to remove that because it shouldn't be in there. The first cross section is the updated version with the slippage and the tilting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, you talk about structural complexity, and boy, oh boy.
Yeah, it's a bit of and I think that's why a lot of folks walked away, right? Because there's a lot going on. And if you were most structures in Nevada, like Northwesters, like that corridor, and the DDF and Swift faults, they're typically pretty steeply dipping, right? But that whole mountain range actually ended up being tilted 35, 40 degrees to the east. And that's not typical of this neck of the woods. It was kind of its own little thing, and it wasn't identified until the USGS picked up on it. I think about 10 years ago. They started writing about it, and we actually have been working with a guy that did his thesis on it, Carson Richardson out of the University of Arizona. He's now with the USGS, and we worked with him on that model and said, okay, why were the old holes? Why did they drill here when they thought they were sitting on top of an arsenic anomaly? Why did they drill and miss? And he said, well, the reason is since everything's tilted, if your arsenic anomaly, for example, is right by the Elder Creek mine, you would want to drill to the west of that arsenic anomaly because everything's been tilted and it's dipping down. So if you're seeing an anomaly right where those trenches are, you need to be drilling a half kilometer west of that to actually hit the rock that is sourcing that arsenic at surface. So, if you didn't apply that tilting model to it, you'd be hitting spots and going, well, this doesn't make any sense. I'm drilling right on top of an anomaly and I'm missing. There must be nothing here. Well, that's because it's a half kilometer away. Or it could be, right? I mean, there's no guarantees in anything, but that's I think what's kind of cracked that open for us. And by applying,
like basin and range type stuff almost.
Yeah, by applying that tilting model to it, it kind of it explains why old holes missed and why why they hit what they did.
Well done.
And so we just got to go in and try to prove it. We'll see.
Oh boy. And you said this is coming up right away.
Yeah, we announced the drill permit was already approved yesterday, and we're
That's
going to
right.
start dirt work on the 31st of
And
August.
I guess we spoke about it, but sometimes these crews, they mobilize and it's the wrong drill rig, or it's this goes wrong or that goes wrong. So you know what you're doing in advance. It's all planned
Oh
out.
yeah, no, I mean, I'd call my partner for sure and say, "Hey man, why'd you send me the wrong rig?" It wouldn't. So he's been good. That kind of stuff doesn't happen with us, luckily. So
No,
yeah.
you can't really afford to make, it's
Well, you can't risk sterilizing a target because you
no,
drilled in
it's
the wrong spot or didn't, and like for us, we had 1.6 million in the bank as of the end of June. That was our last financial statement. We're working on the Q2 stuff now, but we have enough in the bank before we even did the IPO raise to do all of this drilling. So everything we raised on the IPO is follow up on success and cover our 2021 programs. And then on top of that, we have, $2.6 million worth of warrants sitting in the wings.
yeah.
We're already halfway to that exercise. The accelerator, we have a 30-day accelerator on it at 85 cents. So, some success at Selena would get those exercised, and then we'd have another 2.5 million to work with. So put us in a pretty good spot.
The goat target. I'm just trying to figure out the goat target there.
It's
That's
projected. Yeah. The
wow.
the anticline is or the Elder Creek mine would be projected onto the
Yes.
section. Yeah. But there's a few holes down to the south and stuff like that hit altered rock, like that big long guy there, but it was way off of the main target area, right? So yeah,
Wow.
the goat anticline has a ton of scale to it. Like it could be huge if we can prove the concept.
What a swinging for the fences again. I love it.
Trying, yeah. So, and then, like I said, Selena's that kind of,
Get on
Selena's
the
that very
bunt.
realistic. Yeah, that's the bunt, but bunts still score, and
It's a team
yeah,
game. It's a
yeah,
team game.
exactly. So Selena's doing all the dirty work, but
Well,
we're
you get
swinging.
the bases loaded, and all of a sudden a bunt walks somebody in, or so. I don't know. You got
That's
to be
exactly
careful.
it. No, that's a good analog, actually. But yeah, so I think it's a good mix, right? We're
Wow.
balancing risk. We're trying to balance the risk to the shareholders. The drilling and the prepaying assays brings that down even more because we're getting quick turnarounds and lower costs than our peers. So no, it's I think it's a good model. I just hope we can. Next step is actually going out and improving it, right? Actually hitting something.
Impressive. This is, there's always this question about, will the junior mining sector oblige with the discoveries that need to be made to come up with the shortfall of gold reserves and all this, and inspiring for me to hear a story. It's like, yes, potentially so.
Yeah, we're trying. And you know what? There's a lot of really, really great companies out there that have been waiting in the wings, right? Because it's
Yeah.
good management teams that didn't want to dilute, that weren't doing some of the work that maybe they wanted to get done because they knew that they couldn't raise the money to do it. But you can see a lot of them are taking off now, right? They raised their $5-6 million bucks. Good teams, good projects. So I think we're going to see a lot more discoveries across the board. But I hope we're leading the charge in Nevada.
Well, again, you look at everything that comes together with you guys, whether it's, the shareholders or the where you got the properties or how you're approaching the field work, just everything very impressive.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. We've been
good job with the marketing too. It's always great to see you active on social media and stuff like that too.
Well, that's my wife actually is handling all of our social media, and she's having a blast doing it. So
She's doing a great job. Yeah, cheers. I
appreciate it.
Fun to see this little video of the crew setting up a rig.
That was pretty cool, eh? No, we took that, and I'd actually in my 10+ years doing exploration too, I'd actually yet to see a full probably set up and take down from start to finish, right? Because it takes a few hours. So filmed it and it turned out pretty cool.
The time lapse videos, and showing the workflow, it's really important to do that because people who trade the stocks or whatever, they think it's just this, it's a news release or whatever. They don't realize it's shoe leather and drill steel that's discoveries are made on, right?
No, absolutely. And I was super pumped that my entire crew was wearing helmets and everything the whole time too. It worked out.
Yeah, they look like a serious group here.
Yeah,
sure.
They actually know what they're doing for a few seconds here, so it's good.
And so what's the details of that arrangement? Are they a shareholder?
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, very simply, I went 50-50 with Steve, the owner of the drilling company. He, he helped me formed the company financially. We split her down the middle, and then I spent a year and a half flying around the country trying to get deals done, financed, etc. And so we essentially just split the founding shares right down the middle. And then where I've kind of increased my position is I put an additional 150 grand of my own cash into the company over the last 3 financings. So between that and options as being part of the management team, I've been able to get my ownership up to about 7.5% non-diluted. And I'll be about, I think fully diluted, I'm about 9.5%.
Yeah, bullish, hey?
Yeah, I sure hope it works out, because I've put everything, we put the whole, pretty much my wife and I just pretty much went all in on this and figured if it doesn't work out, we're young enough that we can kind of start over again and stuff.
That's the right way to go. No,
we're pretty committed. Yeah.
Burn the boats. We're here.
Yeah, there's no going back. Yeah.
And this crew, are they still contracting for other people? Obviously,
yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're very busy. Yeah, they're kind of like, call them like probably a boutique RC firm. He'd hate to be called that, but they have about 6 rigs, and they're really great at small, out in the middle of nowhere programs like that. Like you get some of the bigger drilling companies be like, I don't want to go here. This looks like
literally it's
100 miles from the nearest highway. No way. But these guys are pretty badass. They don't, they're able to get the job done. So they do a lot of work for junior companies. They're doing all the work for, at the Griffin mine for Fremont. They do a lot of drilling for smaller groups. They were my primary contractor at Premier when we discovered CSD Gap.
Love the track mounted RC rigs like that, and I'm sure that can be changed over to have core as well too, and it's a beast of a drill there. I like
it's a pretty sweet setup, yeah, and it could plow your driveway if you needed it to in a pinch.
Yeah, with the blade at the front's always important. Yeah. Yeah. And that truck in the background too with those big knobbies. Well done. These guys, they brought the gear.
Steve may have a bit of a problem with going to military auctions and stuff. He loves old military equipment stuff. So
Humvees for everybody. Yeah, let's go.
There's some pretty cool old equipment that probably could have ended up in Soviet era Russia and stuff like that. That's now bumping around drill programs in Nevada. So it's pretty cool.
If it keeps running, right? That's what you need. You need these bullet strong machines that just keep going and going and going.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today here, Chad.
No, thanks. I kind of chewed your ear off, so I appreciate your patience there.
Well, let's see what we can do in terms of getting a video out there for everybody on the internet, and I'll work on getting a transcript out for all you people who don't want to sit and listen to 2 hours of us talking, but it would flip through and read it for 10 minutes or something, and some social media posts going as we go. Amazing.
You got it. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Chad Peters, President and CEO of RIDGELINE Minerals. Thanks very much.